Good morning, dear colleagues. Let me remind members that they should insert their badge before taking the floor. As you begin your speech, please press the microphone button once only, wait a couple of seconds, and then start speaking. I also remind the Assembly that members who have not submitted an annual declaration of interest are required to start any intervention with an oral declaration of interest under paragraph 20 of the Code of Conduct for members of the Parliamentary Assembly. We now come to the joint debate on two reports from the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media. The first is titled Protecting Human Rights in and Through Sport, Obligations and Shared Responsibilities, document 16196, presented by Mr. Kim Valentin. And the second is titled The Olympic Movement and Peacekeeping, is Sport Neutrality Serving Sport Values, document 16185, presented by Mr. Morgens Jessen. We will aim to finish this item by 12 p.m. Both rapporteurs have 7 minutes each now and 3 minutes each at the end to reply to the debate. I call first Mr. Kim Valentin, rapporteur, to present the first report. Kim, you have the floor.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, it's an honor to present the report entitled Protecting Human Rights in and Through Sports, Obligations and Shared Responsibilities. That's an important byline. But sometimes I also have been a little sad about how slow progress have been in the sports federations about human rights. Just on a personal note, to start off, this has been a journey where we had to push and pull everyone to the table. Sport is a powerful tool for inclusion, well-being, and human connection. But that same power can be misused. In recent years, we have seen growing evidence of abuse, discrimination, and exploitation within sport. Athletes and children have suffered in silence. Major events have been taking place in countries with poor human rights records. Sports governance have too often lacked transparency and accountability. That's the easy way of saying it. And it's our job to do something about it. This report sets out a clear roadmap for change. It focuses on 3 main priorities: ending abuse in sport, promoting gender equality and inclusion, and embedding binding human rights standards into the organization of major sporting events. First, I have 3 points. First, the fight against abuse. Our committee heard moving testimonies from survivors of violence in sport. We heard how a culture of silence and impunity has allowed psychological and physical sexual abuse to persist. This is children we are talking about, particularly against children and young athletes. These are not isolated incidents. Abuse in sport is widespread and systemic. This is why we call on 46 Council Europe member states to integrate human rights protection into national sport policies. Appoint child safeguarding officers in federations, and establish independent national safe sports units. These bodies must be trauma-informed, victim-centered, and well-resourced. This will not be easy, but it is the way we have to go. We also call on international sport federations to put in place clear safeguarding policies, provide mandatory training, and create accessible, multilingual reporting mechanisms. Athletes must have safe spaces to speak out. Survivors must be included in decision-making. Above all, we must make clear that abuse will not be tolerated. This is the first point. Second, we address discrimination and the need for gender equality in sport. Despite some encouraging developments, women and marginalized groups continue to face barriers. They are underrepresented in leadership, underpaid, and underprotected. Sport should empower all, not exclude some. We welcome the progress made through the Joint Council of Europe and EU project All in Plus, and the initiatives of many federations. But much more is needed. Governments must invest in programs that support women's participation, penalize discrimination, and collect data to guide effective policy. Sport bodies must adopt measurable gender equality plans, improve presentation, and support mentoring and leadership for women. Inclusion must also address intersection forms of discrimination, LGBTI persons, persons with disabilities, ethnic minorities, and others face specific barriers. We urge all actors to develop intersectional approaches to make sport truly open to all. To make sport truly open to all. Third, we address the need for strong human rights conditionalities in the hosting of major sport events. It is no longer acceptable that tournaments are awarded without transparent human rights assessments. All too often, such events are hosted in countries where workers' rights, freedom of expression, and safety are not guaranteed. We call for binding standards to be applied to all bidding processes, including requirements for contextualized human rights, risk assessments, human rights actions plans, and independent monitoring mechanisms. Host countries must be held accountable. Victims must access to remedies, and civil society must have a voice throughout the process.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
I call now Mogens Jensen, rapporteur, to present the second report. Mogens, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, it's with great enthusiasm that I present this report, which we in the Committee on Culture, Education and Science and Media anonymously adopted on the 7th of April. Sport, at its very best, is a unifying force. It brings people together across borders, languages and ideologies. It builds bridges in times of tension, and it prevents and provides common ground where politics cannot do it. The Olympic movement in particular has long been a symbol of peace and international cooperation. But today, colleagues, we are compelled to ask difficult questions. Are the ideals of Olympism truly being upheld in a world shaken by conflict and rising authoritarianism? Is the principle of sport neutrality shielding values, or is it at times being used to evade responsibility? The principle of neutrality in sport must never become a pretext for silence. When war is waged, when human rights are violated, when the very fabric of democratic values is torn, sport cannot look the other way. This report is not an attack on the International Olympic Committee. It's a call. It's a call for greater clarity, for stronger accountability, and for renewed courage to ensure that neutrality never comes at the expense of human dignity. It's a call to reinforce the Olympic truth, to make it binding, to ensure that peace is not just an aspiration, but a precondition for participation in the Olympic Games. Our Assembly has consistently affirmed that while athletes should not be punished for the actions of their governments, we must recognize the real risk of their victories being misused for political propaganda. Where athletes are state employees, where freedom of expression is suppressed, where dissent leads to persecution, neutrality becomes fiction. In such contexts, we must uphold the principle of allowing participation only under the Olympic banner as independent and truly athletes, truly neutral athletes. In addition, exceptional circumstances may require even stronger measures, including a total ban on athletes from a given country. The situation in the Russian Federation and Belarus illustrates this vividly. And this approach is not punitive, it is principled. It's a form of sanction that speaks the language of sport, removing the symbols of state power and abuse without punishing individual excellence. At the heart of our report lies a simple truth. Human rights must take precedence over political convenience. We urge the IOC to amend the Olympic Charter to make this truth explicit. Rule 50, which limits the political expression by athletes, must be reformed to ensure that speaking out for peace or denouncing human rights violations is not only permitted, but welcomed. Silence is not neutrality when injustice is at stake. Athletes are not just participants, they are role models. They are ambassadors of values. They must be free to express themselves within reasonable and respectful bounds, and we must protect that freedom. Colleagues, as some of you might know, on the 21st of May, I had the honor, together with Kim and our president of the committee, to visiting FIFA headquarters in Zurich with a good meeting with FIFA representatives. We met them. They are the world's most powerful football body, and we discussed these concerns: human rights, governance, and the responsibilities that come with wealth, power, and influence. And I'm encouraged by FIFA's openness and the opportunity for continued dialogue, including through the work of our newly established Parliamentary Alliance for Good Governance and Integrity in Sport. This alliance, which you all can be a member of, is an important milestone. It signals that parliaments, the democratic conscience of our societies, are ready to engage directly with sport bodies to ensure that ethics, transparency, and accountability are not optional, but essential. I sincerely hope that the International Olympics Committee, under the newly elected President, Ms. Kirsty Coventry, will seize this opportunity. Ms. Coventry's election is historic. She is the first woman and the first African to lead the IOC. Her leadership comes at a time when the Olympic movement is at a crossroads. I express my hope that she will take bold steps to engage with our Assembly and with the Council of Europe to help chart a future where sports is genuine for peace and democracy. Our recommendations today are feasible and necessary. We call on the IOC to make the Olympic truce an enforceable condition of participation, to amend Rule 50 to ensure that athletes can speak out in defense of peace and rights, establish an independent human rights monitoring mechanism, and develop a sports judiciary body to interpret the Charter with impartiality and consistency. Let us make clear that neutrality without values is not neutrality, it's abdication. Let us instead reaffirm the Olympic spirit as a spirit of peace, of dignity, and of shared humanity. I thank you, and I count on your support.
Merci, Monsieur le rapporteur Jensen. Maintenant, nous allons passer à la discussion générale et je rappelle que la durée d'intervention est limitée à 3 minutes par orateur. Et au nom des groupes politiques, pour le groupe ALDE, j'appelle Monsieur Petri Honkonen.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues. First, I want to thank you, our Danish colleagues, for excellent work with these reports. Sport is a value and an ideology in itself too, and one of the fundamental principles in the Olympic Charter is Olympism seeks to create a way of life based on the joy of effort, the educational value of good example, social responsibility, and respect for universal fundamental ethical principles. In sports, athletes compete against each other, but at the same time, nations also compete by shared values. Recently, we have witnessed attempts to tarnish these core values of sport, and one of the saddest examples being to attempt to allow Russia to participate in the Paris Summer Olympics. Sport is not political, and politics should not be mixed into it, but we must also understand that sport cannot be entirely neutral either. I used to serve as a Minister of Sports of Finland when the sports movement, the Olympic movement, was preparing to the previous Summer Games, and to me it was self-evident that Russia, as a state brutally violating international law, could not take part in the Olympic Games. Many of my European colleagues in that time shared this view, and I understand, personally, I totally understand that individual athletes may face a difficult choice between representing their country and seizing a rare opportunity in their personal careers. But however, those of us who respect democracy and international law must uphold our values also in the realm of sports. Awarding the FIFA World Cup to Saudi Arabia, a country hostile to human rights, is also a miserable example of this phenomenon I described. I deeply hope, also on behalf of the ALDE group, I hope that member states will strongly support respect for the sacred values of sport, and through that support also for a just and rule-based world order. I agree with the draft resolution of Mr. Valentin that it is necessary for this Assembly to continue monitoring the framework of the Parliamentary Alliance for Good Governance and Integrity of Sport and to work with these sport bodies, governments, and ensure that the promise of human rights in sports becomes a reality for all. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Onkonen. Pour le groupe GUE, la parole est à Madame Catala.
Monsieur le Président, nous avons deux débats conjoints aujourd'hui sur la neutralité dans le sport et le respect des droits humains par et dans le sport. Le premier débat m'amène à dire que je crois qu'il faut rappeler que le sport est politique. Lorsqu'en 1968, des athlètes noirs lèvent le poing dans une époque d'Amérique ségrégationniste, je crois que c'est politique. Lorsque la Russie est exclue depuis 2022 des Jeux Olympiques et que ces athlètes ne peuvent concourir que sous bannière neutre et que s'ils affirment ne pas soutenir la guerre ou ne pas y avoir participé, je crois que c'est nécessaire parce que la Russie agresse l'Ukraine et c'est politique. Et lorsque, pareil, nous décidons, enfin, le comité olympique décide qu'Israël, qui commet des crimes de guerre et des crimes contre l'humanité, comme la Russie, peut participer aux Jeux olympiques et ne pas subir les mêmes sanctions que la Russie, je crois que c'est politique. Et d'ailleurs, la Russie va pouvoir participer, va être exclue des Jeux olympiques d'hiver de 2026, ce qui me paraît totalement normal, et les autres pays qui commettent des crimes devraient subir le même sort. Et c'est là qu'on voit encore qu'il y a un deux poids, deux mesures qui, pour ma part, est insupportable. Le deuxième débat sur les droits humains m'amène à signaler à l'ensemble de cette Assemblée ici, du Conseil de l'Europe, ce qui se passe en France, parce que ce qui se passe en France est unique à l'échelle des pays de l'Union européenne et du Conseil de l'Europe. La France va peut-être devenir le premier pays à interdire le voile pour des compétitions sportives. Vous me direz, c'est totalement ridicule puisque lors des JO de l'été 2024, notre ministre des Sports, Amélie Oudéa-Castéra, a interdit à nos propres sportifs français de porter le voile pendant que l'ensemble des spectateurs, incluant des Français, pouvaient applaudir des femmes portant le voile d'autres pays. La laïcité est donc instrumentalisée en France à des fins de stigmatisation d'une seule religion, et en particulier, évidemment, des femmes, comme les femmes qui accompagnent des enfants en sortie scolaire en France et qui sont voilées sont stigmatisées, comme les étudiantes qui portent le voile à l'université en France sont stigmatisées par un ministre de l'Intérieur qui s'appelle M. Retailleau, qui pourrait être le ministre de Mme Le Pen. Et je vais vous lire ce que Amnesty International dit à cet égard, puisque la loi qui est en projet en France et qui est le projet du ministre de l'Intérieur ferait de l'interdiction du voile une position de principe, alors qu'aujourd'hui, c'est les fédérations qui sont libres en France d'interdire au cas par cas le voile. Et Amnesty International nous dit la chose suivante: la France est le seul pays d'Europe à interdire le port de couvre-chef religieux dans le sport, notamment dans le football, le basketball et le volleyball féminin. Aucun autre pays de la région, que ce soit au niveau des lois nationales ou des règlements de chaque sport, n'a inscrit dans ses règles une interdiction des couvre-chefs religieux qui s'applique à certaines femmes et filles musulmanes. Je crois que cela devrait alerter toute notre Assemblée et que cela illustre la période pré-fasciste dans laquelle nous nous dirigeons. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame Catala. La parole maintenant est à Madame Caramanli pour le groupe socialiste. Vous avez la parole, Madame Caramanli.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Oui, d'abord, je souhaite, au nom du groupe socialiste, de remercier nos deux collègues Kim Valentin du Danemark et Mons Sensen de Danemark, pour leurs deux rapports. Tous deux interrogent à partir de deux sujets connexes, la place et le rôle du sport dans la vie politique, sociale et internationale. Le Conseil de l'Europe a porté plusieurs normes sportives importantes, entre autres la Charte européenne du sport, le Code éthique sportive et la Convention contre le dopage et d'autres. Il est avec notre Assemblée le créateur de l'Alliance parlementaire pour la bonne gouvernance et l'intégrité dans le sport. Le projet donc de résolution sur la protection des droits humains dans le sport invite, entre autres, les États à inscrire la promotion et la protection des droits humains dans les cadres nationaux et leurs politiques sportives en tant qu'obligation juridique et éthique. Il s'agit notamment d'inscrire la lutte contre les violences faites aux sportifs, en particulier aux femmes et aux enfants, dans un cadre durable et favorable aux victimes. De son côté, le projet de résolution sur la neutralité du sport invite à ce que les dispositions de la charte olympique qui engage le CIO et ses membres renforcent leur devoir à respecter et protéger la dignité humaine et les droits humains et à modifier la règle 50 de la charte olympique de manière à préciser que la neutralité politique n'empêche pas les athlètes de soutenir la paix ou de condamner les violations des droits humains. Toutes ces propositions vont dans le bon sens. Je souhaite attirer votre attention sur 4 points. L'existence et les travaux de l'Alliance doivent être mieux identifiés et connus au niveau du Conseil, mais aussi des États et de toutes celles et tous ceux qui sont intéressés ou touchés par le sport. La question des normes est importante, mais elle ne peut se suffire à elle-même. On le voit dans un État comme la France, où un rapport parlementaire a mis en évidence une défaillance systémique dans la prévention et le traitement des abus et des violences, malgré les dispositifs existants. Il faut donc l'ensemble des acteurs se sentent engagés, comités locaux, clubs locaux, encadrants, entraîneurs, parents, voire partenaires financiers. Les principes doivent être rappelés, agir dans l'intérêt des athlètes, élaborer une procédure de protection claire pour prévenir et limiter les risques, engagement dans tous les acteurs, fédérations internationales, nationales, comités locaux, clubs locaux, encadrants, voire partenaires et financiers. Autre point aussi à rappeler, c'est l'attention d'un grand nombre de sports et d'activités sportives qui se pratiquent hors des clubs. Et donc, les activités nécessitent peu de matériel parfois, ou pouvant être exercées en dehors d'un club ou d'une structure qui sont de plus en plus aujourd'hui plébiscitées. C'est un phénomène à comprendre et à suivre. Enfin, je dirais, notre groupe soutiendra les 2 rapporteurs et les 2 rapports qui sont préconisés aujourd'hui. Et effectivement, nous nous engageons une nouvelle étape dans ce travail aussi avec l'Alliance parlementaire pour le sport et l'éthique dans le sport.
Merci Madame Caramanli. Pour le groupe PPE, la parole est à Madame Yasko. Madame Yasko, vous avez la parole.
Let me congratulate our reporters for bringing this very important topic of sports as a soft power in our lives. And I'm grateful personally because these discussions, and I was present when these reports were discussed in the Cultural Committee and the hearings, brought me back when I was studying the ancient Greek philosophy. And that actually says that the sports is incredibly important for democracy. And I just want to ask us here, do we remember that the sports actually can be used to promote democratic security? Do we remember that? Maybe we can use it much more in our countries for positive reasons. However, as rightly said, sports very often is used with political goals, with manipulation, with propaganda. And I want to emphasize on a number of these cases. First of all, it matters from whom do you take money if you want to fund your sports activities. I mean here Russian Gazprom that continues sponsoring European clubs, sports clubs. And while there are sanctions on Russia and there are certain limitations of the Russian sportsmen, still Russia manages to sponsor very openly, despite the fact that this money is dirty. The second question I want to raise is whether if the sportsmen that represent Russian Ministry of Defense or Russian military, whether they can be neutral and whether they can participate in the sports big competitions in the same way, whether this can be even discussed as neutrality, probably, of course, no. On the positive side, I want to mention that the sport really helps to heal society. And many Ukrainian sportsmen, including young young children. And there is a story of Alexandra Pascal, who lost her leg, but she continues competing in a sports competition with prosthetics leg. And I want to applaud for all these people who continue their fight through the sports and where sports can be so useful. There are many examples in the history where the sports can be used as the healing after the wars. And that's something I would like to encourage all of us to look at more and to establish and to support more, because sports can be very healthy and very good for the health of democracies of our societies. Thank you.
Merci Madame Yasko. Et pour le groupe CEPA, la parole est à Madame Thiblum.
Merci, Monsieur President, esteemed colleagues. We are gathered here today to reaffirm the vital principle of protecting human rights in and through sports, a mission that speaks to the heart of our democratic values. Sport is more than competition. It is a reflection of the societies we strive to build, inclusive, fair, and respectful of human dignity. But as lawmakers and guardians of rights, we must also address the difficult questions. One such question concerns the participation of transgender athletes in competitive sports. This is a topic that demands both compassion and clarity, especially when the rights of different groups come into conflict. Let me be clear, every individual, regardless of gender identity, has the right to be treated with dignity and respect. Transgender people must never be marginalized or excluded from public life. That includes access to physical activity and sport. But we must also ensure that our pursuit of inclusion does not undermine fairness, particularly in women's sports, where physical advantages from male puberty can remain even after transition. This is not merely a theoretical debate. Across Europe, female athletes are voicing concerns that their hard-won rights to fair competition are being eroded. They ask a legitimate question: can inclusion be meaningful if it comes at the cost of fairness? When biological males compete in women categories and consistently dominate, are we still protecting equal opportunities? The Council of Europe has a duty to lead with both courage and integrity. Protecting human rights through sport means protecting all rights, the right to compete, but also right to fair and safe conditions. These are not mutually exclusive goals, but they require evidence-based policies, transparency, and open dialogue. Science, not slogans, must guide our approach. Our challenge is to craft solutions that respect gender identity while preserving the integrity of women's sports. This is not exclusionary, it is responsible governance. It is our shared responsibility as public representatives. Let us work together toward balanced, right-based policies that uphold the principle of fairness, inclusion, and respect in sport and beyond. Thank you.
Merci Madame Thiblum. La liste des orateurs de groupes politiques est donc terminée. Nous abordons maintenant le débat général et la parole est à Madame Martínez Cerro.
Gracias, presidente. Permítanme comenzar esta intervención expresando mi más sincero reconocimiento a los ponentes, señor Kim Valentin y el señor Mogens Jensen, por su extraordinario trabajo en la elaboración de estos informes. Se abordan con contundencia cuestiones que no podemos seguir ignorando: los abusos sistémicos, la discriminación persistente, la desigualdad de género, la falta de transparencia en la adjudicación de grandes eventos deportivos y la necesidad urgente de establecer mecanismos independientes de protección y reparación para las víctimas, pero también la exigencia de cláusulas vinculantes de derechos humanos en los procesos de candidaturas y organización de competiciones internacionales. Y en referencia a los menores, destaco el enfoque de su protección en el deporte como una prioridad urgente. Se denuncian los abusos físicos, psicológicos y sexuales que sufren niños y niñas en entornos deportivos, muchas veces, tristemente, silenciados por culturas de impunidad. Por ello, se propone la creación de unidades independientes de deporte seguro o la implementación de mecanismos de denuncia accesibles y sensibles al trauma. Estas medidas demuestran que es posible avanzar hacia un modelo de gobernanza deportiva basado en los derechos humanos, la equidad y la rendición de cuentas. Sin embargo, como bien señala el informe, aún queda mucho por hacer. La persistencia de abusos, la falta de mecanismos eficaces de denuncia y reparación y la adjudicación de eventos deportivos a países con graves déficits en derechos humanos nos obligan a actuar con mayor firmeza. No podemos permitir que el deporte, que debería ser un espacio de libertad, respeto y superación, se convierta en un espacio de impunidad y sufrimiento. Y por ello nosotros en mi país, lo puedo decir y lo digo con orgullo, hemos recogido todos estos valores que aparecen en estos dos informes en nuestra nueva ley del deporte. La neutralidad del deporte no debe justificar la inacción ante las violaciones de derechos humanos. Las organizaciones deportivas tienen la responsabilidad de actuar con responsabilidad y proteger los derechos humanos. Y en este sentido es fundamental que se adopten políticas que protejan la libertad de expresión de los atletas, permitiéndoles apoyar la paz y condenar las violaciones de derechos humanos sin temor a represalias. Además, la tregua olímpica debe evolucionar de un simple símbolo a una obligación vinculante, asegurando que cualquier país en conflicto se comprometa a cesar las hostilidades durante la duración de los Juegos Olímpicos. Este compromiso no solo promovería la paz y la cooperación global, sino que también reforzaría la importancia de los derechos humanos en el ámbito deportivo. Estos dos informes nos ofrecen una visión clara de los desafíos que enfrenta el mundo del deporte, así como de las oportunidades que tenemos para convertirlo en un verdadero motor de inclusión, dignidad y derechos humanos. Muchas gracias y nuevamente mi reconocimiento a los señores Valentín y al señor Jensen.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Dalloz.
Chers collègues, l'article 50 de la Charte olympique pose clairement le principe de neutralité politique, mais également religieuse dans le sport. En 2019, le président du CIO, Thomas Bach, demandait aux comités nationaux « Concentrez-vous sur l'unité du sport, concentrez-vous sur ce qui nous unit et non sur ce qui nous divise ou sur ceux qui tentent de nous diviser. Car c'est bien de cela qu'il s'agit. Remettre en cause la neutralité dans le sport, c'est refuser l'universalité et la solidarité qui sont au cœur du message olympique. L'olympisme n'a été que trop souvent victime des soubresauts du monde. Attentats à Atlanta, massacre des athlètes israéliens à Munich, boycott à Moscou et Los Angeles, sans parler des Jeux de 1936. Les athlètes en ont été les seules victimes, devant se résoudre à ne pas participer aux Jeux après 4 ans d'efforts et de sacrifices. Cette neutralité, nous devons l'exiger de tous et dans toutes les compétitions. On ne saurait tolérer une instrumentalisation des événements sportifs. Monsieur le rapporteur, vous soulignez la difficulté pour les athlètes venant de pays autoritaires de prendre position contre leur gouvernement. C'est une réalité. Peut-on imaginer que les grands champions olympiques, par exemple pour l'URSS, soutenaient le régime parce qu'ils ne le condamnaient pas? Doit-on pour autant leur interdire toute compétition? Je ne le pense pas. Doivent-ils apparaître sous bannière neutre? Dans certains cas, probablement. L'équipe des réfugiés est un bon mode de la puissance de la bannière neutre. C'est un bon modèle. Rappelons qu'à Moscou, Sébastien Coe aura écouté l'hymne olympique sur le podium. Dans votre rapport, vous insistez peu sur la question pourtant inscrite dans l'article 50 de la Charte sur la neutralité religieuse. Elle me semble pourtant essentielle au message universaliste de l'olympisme. Essentielle car cette neutralité permet aussi de rappeler que face aux extrémismes religieux, des hommes et surtout des femmes se battent chaque jour et que leur courage doit être soutenu. Ce courage en pleine guerre civile de l'Algérienne Hassiba Boulmerka, ce courage de la grimpeuse iranienne El Nazrekabi, courage de ces athlètes qui se battent pour pratiquer un sport interdit ou réservé aux hommes. Il faut exiger de chaque sportif, quelle que soit sa religion, une stricte neutralité. Comme la bannière neutre, on ne devrait pas identifier les personnes par leur appartenance religieuse, ou plutôt démontrer que le sport n'a comme seule religion la performance, le courage, le dépassement de soi et comme credo le respect de tous et la fraternité. Sans la neutralité politique et religieuse, l'olympisme ne pourra diffuser ses valeurs et à plus forte raison porter son message de paix. C'est le plus grand défi que nous devons mener, que devra mener la première présidente du CEO qui a pris son poste hier. Merci.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Bartos.
Dear Mr. President, dear fellow representatives, sport is a segment of the common good. It strengthens the cohesion of the members of our communities and the physical and mental health of our individuals. Hungary's goal is not only to excel at professional sport, but also to become a sporting nation. Sport can create a sense of cohesion and solidarity and contribute to skills and self-development outside traditional institutions such as school, work, or family. Sport activities can help young people acquire skills that complement formal education and enhance their employability. The Hungarian government considers sport to be a national strategic sector. It pays particular attention to improving the health of the population, increasing the number of people who regularly take part in sport, and reduces regional disparities, as these can significantly lower our health expenditure and improve our economic performance in the long run. The Olympic movement has long been associated with the promotion of peace through sports, while it is not immune to geopolitical conflict. Founded on the principles of unity, respect, and fair competition, the Olympics aim to transcend political, cultural, and religious differences by bringing people together in a spirit of friendship and mutual understanding. The concept of sport neutrality refers to the idea that sports should remain free from political, religious, and other external influences, focusing slightly on fair competition, mutual respect, and the spirit of the game. Sport can serve as a neutral platform to bring people together across conflicts. We really need this now. Last but not least, I would like to thank the rapporteurs for their great work. Thank you for your kind attention.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Buchel.
Geschätzter Vorsitzender, geschätzte Damen und Herren. Vielen Dank den beiden Rapporteuren für die Berichte, auch den Mitarbeiterinnen und den Mitarbeitern des Sekretariats. Es kommt sehr viel Erfahrung zusammen bei den Leuten, die da mitgearbeitet haben und auch bei den Leuten, die hier im Saal sitzen. Wir haben ehemalige Sportminister, wir haben Athleten, wir haben Top-Athleten, ehemalige. Ich schaue auf Platz 347. Herr Vogt, neues Mitglied. Er hat ein Skiweltcup-Rennen gewonnen, Olympischen Spielen teilgenommen und so weiter. Er war damals Teil des Schweizer Trainingsteams, wofür ich die Sponsoring-Aktivitäten leitete. Später war ich für FIFA-Projekte zuständig und ich versuchte unter anderem die Club-WM zu etablieren. Es war ein Desaster. Keine Chance, wir hatten 5, 6 Teams, wir brachten nichts zusammen. Heute generiert dieser Anlass, der gerade in den USA stattfindet, Millionen. Dutzende, Hunderte Millionen. Dem Sieger werden über 100 Millionen Euro ausbezahlt werden. Viel wichtiger aber ist das Geld, das generiert wird, das für den Sport, für die Entwicklung des Sports eingesetzt werden kann. Sie sehen es, hier in diesem Saal trifft Theorie auf Praxis und das ist auch gut so. Ich werde jetzt auf Englisch wechseln und ein paar Dinge sagen. I'm convinced that sport has the power to drive change in our societies as a tool for diplomacy, a catalyst for social inclusion and a force for promoting fairness and equality. Werden wir konkret? Wenn wir vom IOC reden, wenn wir von der FIFA reden, wenn wir von weltweiten Verbänden reden, dann gehen wir hinaus in die weite Welt, also über die Grenzen unserer Mitgliedsländer hinaus. Since 2017, FIFA has aligned with Council of Europe recommendations by embedding human rights requirements into its bidding and hosting processes. This includes the need for independent human rights assessments, strategic frameworks, and formal guarantees from host governments. Such measurements have already led to significant human rights commitments, even from the Saudi government for the World Cup, which will be held in 2034. Similar in Qatar. Sport is not about exclusion. Sport is about inclusion and engagement. It's about sharing the beauty of the game across all regions and using it as a bridge for dialogue, progress, and transformation. Like Rapporteur Jensen, I welcome the federations, especially FIFA's openness and willingness to engage in honest, constructive dialogue. We should seize this opportunity to make a real impact with the people who have the real impact in sports. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Hunt.
Merci beaucoup. I want to start by thanking the two rapporteurs and my colleagues on the Culture Committees for their excellent, thoughtful and detailed analysis of sport. I know that the hard work will now begin in attempting to implement the recommendations of the reports, and I hope that they have our full support. Sport teaches us that fairness is sacred. It is the foundation upon which all competition rests. Protecting human rights through sport signals a way of living in the world and demonstrates how to treat people. Therefore, as we grapple with complex questions around trans and intersex participation, we must remember that how we treat these athletes sends ripples far beyond our stadiums. When athletes are exposed to public scrutiny and speculation and rigid ideas about what makes a woman, sport risks creating a narrative that travels across borders. In countries where being perceived as LGBTI can mean persecution, imprisonment, or worse, these frantic speculations carry profound weight. Every athlete questioning their place in sport is watching. Every young person struggling with their identity sees how sports responds. Every government seeking to justify discrimination points to how sports manages these issues as a justification for their own approach. The Olympic movement speaks of building a better world through sport, yet we risk teaching the opposite lesson if we do not find a humane way of managing difference. The events around women's boxing in 2024 signal that difference is dangerous, that inclusion requires conformity, that some bodies are less worthy of celebration than others. True fairness demands clear and proportionate rules and regulations, but it also demands sporting bodies implement those rules with scientific rigour and discretion, but above all, humanity. It requires us to hold space for complexity while refusing to compromise human dignity. It calls us to lead with compassion, knowing that the signals that are sent from sport echoes in villages and cities where vulnerable people depend on our moral courage. The question is not whether inclusion is challenging, it is. The question is whether we choose to meet that challenge with wisdom and humanity. Thank you.
Merci. Et la parole est à Lord Griffith.
You've taken me by surprise, President, but it's very nice to be.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I'm most grateful to the two great Danes who have introduced these debates and for all the thinking that the Culture Committee has gone through in order to bring these matters to our attention. I've listened carefully to the points that have been made. I share with Mr. Honkonen the experience of having been my government's or my party's spokesperson for sport in the House of Lords in the British Parliament, and there I discovered some very interesting things that perhaps are not touched upon in this report. For example, we had consideration of budgets from government, from our Treasury, to support the world of sport. Governments see an importance in putting out money behind the sporting endeavours that we take for granted. But I have to say that what we worried about was how the proportion between supporting elite sports to produce medal-winning athletes was taking over from the amount of the budget that was intended at grassroots to encourage the playing of games and sports. Now, I am, despite my appearance, a passionate rugby player, also a cool cricketer. And in all senses of the sport, or I should say to an Arsenal supporter, all these things are important because at grassroots level, sport, as we understand it in our schools, in our parks, in our public places, takes energy and provides opportunities, and this is where it touches what the Council of Europe's all about, provides opportunities for ordinary young people and older people to participate in their community lives, to represent their community, their team, their village, or whatever it is. And participation is at the very heart of what we call democracy. So sport must be seen as an adjunct to help us to develop a democratic spirit. And therefore, all the theorizing, and it's been brilliantly exposed in the reports and in speeches up to now, is important, but not at the expense of grassroots sport properly provided. In our schools in England, for example, where budgets in difficult economic times were squeezed, schools were selling their playing fields to raise money to meet their budgetary needs. We simply have to remember that sport is about ordinary people and it fosters community developments, and it isn't just about medals and awards and the elite.
Merci. Et la parole est à Madame Vassiliou Chatsianidou.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Rapporteurs, thank you for these enlightening reports. As a Greek parliamentarian, allow me to begin with a historical reminder. Greece is not only the birthplace of democracy, but also the cradle of the Olympic ideal. The ancient Olympic Games were more than a mere sporting event. They were a celebration of human excellence and the truth, the ekechiria, a pause in hostilities to remind warring city-states of their shared humanity. This legacy carries immense symbolic weight, but it also carries political and ethical responsibility. In today's world, sport is no longer confined only in stadiums and arenas. It is a global force, a cultural and economic phenomenon, and a powerful vehicle for values at times of distortion. Sports has the potential to be a driver of social change. It can empower youth, promote gender equality, integrate migrants, and contribute to mental and physical well-being. It is a platform when human rights can be exercised, but unfortunately also where they can be violated. Let us not ignore the troubling paradoxes presented also by these reports.
Major international sporting events have in recent years been hosted in countries where fundamental human rights and freedoms are systematically suppressed. Athletes have been punished for political expressions, and migrant workers have been exploited in construction of sports infrastructure. We cannot turn a blind eye. The Olympic Charter speaks of political neutrality, but neutrality must not be a shield of inaction. The values enshrined in the Charter respect human dignity, non-discrimination, peace, and these values are not neutral. They are normative and they demand action. The Council of Europe, through its enlarged partial agreement on sport, has been instrumental in promoting ethical sport governance, and we have made important steps, but we must build on this further. As a Greek, I feel deep national connection to the Olympic spirit, but as a European, I feel an even greater responsibility to ensure that this spirit does not become only a historic relic. We must end human rights in all stages of sport governance, from bidding and hosting international events to national training centers and local clubs. Human rights due diligence must become the norm. We must protect athletes' freedom of expression. We must create independent monitoring mechanisms. And sport is not a luxury. It is a mirror of our society and a culture creator. Let us return to the true spirit of Olympics, not in nostalgia, but in action. Let us ensure that sport is not merely neutral, but positively and unapologetically on the side of human rights. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Reader.
Thank you, colleagues. I speak today to echo the calls made by both rapporteurs in the reports in front of us today. On human rights in sport, I support the recommendations on ensuring binding human rights across all levels of sports, from grassroots to elite competitions. What is particularly important right now is that we stand up against the weaponisation of trans rights and ensure that trans athletes are protected in sport from grassroots to elite level. I also in particular join in the calls for human rights conditionalities in bidding and hosting major sporting events. As someone who worked in the bidding profession and I was involved in a number of major sporting events in my time in the construction sector, I think this is absolutely critical. And I saw firsthand in Peru, the UK government supported the Peruvian government to deliver the Pan-American and Pan-American Games in Peru, and the power that had in transforming communities and opening up opportunity for people was really important. It wasn't about the most money made from the Games, it was about opening up opportunity. I also welcome the report's focus on safeguarding and support its recommendations on the establishment of an independent, trauma-informed system to protect athletes. Back home, I'm very fortunate to chair the all-party parliamentary group on wrestling, and I'm picking up from my predecessor, the fantastic Honourable Alex Davis-Jones MP, who has done some brilliant work on safety standards, on calling out misogyny and athlete abuse across the sector. Human rights and safety must be the foundation of any domestic or international sporting pursuits, and this Assembly does have a role in ensuring that. Turning to the report on the Olympic movement and peacekeeping, I fully support the recommendations for strengthening the Charter, and particularly protections for athletes under Rule 50. They should be able to show political expression without fear of recourse. The integrity of sport and the principle of peaceful competition demands no less from us. And whilst we see Russia and Belarus excluded rightly by the IOC, we must make sure that other nations who use sport as a political tool to harm people, and where we see those countries having documented human rights abuses, that they too are held to account in the sporting world. Finally, I echo the rapporteur's calls for strong international cooperation, whether it's through EPAS and other platforms, so that our collective actions match the scale of the challenges that face us. The European family has and always will be stronger when it stands together. And it's for these reasons I urge colleagues to adopt both reports in full. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Kamelchouk. Je lui laisse un peu de temps pour s'installer. Courez pas, vous avez le temps, you have time. Take your time. Ouais. You're welcome.
Right now. Dear Chairman, distinguished colleagues, let me start with a question. Is neutrality still neutral when it protects the aggressor more than a victim? For decades, the Olympic movement has insisted on staying outside politics. But when a terrorist country bombs cities, universities, hospitals, and sport infrastructure, including one of Ukraine's leading technical institutes, it is no longer possible to separate sport from violence. Facilities meant to train athletes and educate youth are turned into rubble. Yet, athletes from the same state, often affiliated with the military, continue to compete internationally under so-called neutral banners. But when missiles are launched at students and sport halls, no neutral form can conceal that complicity. As much 2024, Russia has killed 591 Ukrainian athletes and coaches. 22 are being held in captivity. 11 are missing. These are not just numbers, they are destroyed futures. These were individuals who should have brought glory to sport and their nation, not fallen victim to an aggressor's war. We are told sport must unite, but what are we united around? Around silence? Neutrality was never meant to shield regimes that glorify war. It was meant to protect values, peace, dignity, and fairness. When neutrality is exploited to enable propaganda, it betrays the very spirit it claims to protect. Russian athletes have become instruments of state narrative. Some serve in military clubs, other publicity endorse the invasion. Their victories and broadcast as national triumphs, even as their country erases Ukrainian innocent lives. Participation must be principled. Neutral athletes must prove true independence, no military ties, no support for war, independent verification, and no state declarations. And Olympic truth must carry weight. A country that launches full-scale war during the Games cannot be treated as just another competitor. It must face the real sanctions, including bans from hosting or participating. Colleagues, neutrality in sport cannot become complicity in aggression. When sport is used to glorify autocracy, silence is not impartiality, it is surrender. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Kamelchouk. La parole est à Madame Schwaz.
There is my badge in. Okay, it's okay. What is?
Yes, okay. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. The Council of Europe recognizes that sport is far more than a form of physical exercise or entertainment. It is a potential social force that can promote human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Sport provides a unique platform where the fundamental rights of individuals, such as non-discrimination, dignity, freedom of expression, and equal participation, can be expressed, protected, and amplified. In this light, Hungary holds a firm and principled position. Athletes must not be punished or excluded from international sporting events, including the Olympic Games, solely based on the geopolitical actions of the governments. Such exclusion risks undermining the universal nature of sport and individual rights of athletes, who often have no influence over the decision of their states. At the same time, safeguarding the integrity of sport requires ongoing commitment and collaboration. The Council of Europe has been a pioneer in this regard. It has led international efforts to combat doping, match fixing, and corruption, threats that not only endanger fair play, but also erode public confidence in sport as a whole. Instruments like the Macolin Convention on the Manipulation of Sport Competitions and the Anti-Doping Convention have set strong legal and ethical benchmarks. These conventions emphasize that protecting the integrity of sport is inseparable from protecting the rights of all participants, athletes, fans, officials, and communities alike. Sports also plays a vital role in advancing social cohesion and intercultural understanding. Whether through grassroots initiatives or major international events, sport has the capacity to bring people together across boundaries of nationality, language, religion, and social status. It helps build inclusive communities and fosters values such as respect, teamwork, and solidarity. In this sense, sport can be a bridge to peace and reconciliation, particularly in divided or post-conflict societies. However, for sport to truly fulfill this peace-building function, its governance must be transparent, inclusive, and ethically sound. The Council of Europe stresses the need for democracy, accountability, and human rights governance structures within sport organizations, promoting integrity in leadership and decision-making processes, ensures that the values sport represent fairness, respect, and human dignity. In conclusion, the protection and promotion of human rights in sport is not just the responsibility of any single actor, but a shared duty. Governments, international organizations, sport federations, and civil society must work together to ensure that sports remain a force for good one. Thank you very much indeed.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pierre de Coubertin, the founder of the modern Olympic Games, once said, "The Olympic Games are for the world, and all nations must be admitted to them." As was the case in his lifetime and has been ever since, the ideal has often run up against geopolitical tensions and war, leading to boycotts and bans. Reconciling the Olympic ideals of neutrality, inclusivity, and peace has and will always be a significant challenge. That's why the ancient Greek tradition of the Olympic truce is indispensable. It envisions a world where sport can promote peace, dialogue, and reconciliation, but only, of course, if the truce is actually respected. Sadly, right now, it is simply a symbolic measure. The United Nations recognizes the Olympic truce's potential to foster peace and understanding. The UN General Assembly has adopted resolutions promoting peace through the Olympic ideals. Indeed, Rapporteur Jensen's report proposes making this truce a binding condition of participation. That is, creating a requirement for any country engaged in active warfare or armed conflict to commit to a temporary cessation of hostilities for the duration of the Olympic Games. Though the International Olympic Committee is often opposed to this idea, I believe it holds great merit. Other international sporting events, such as the Commonwealth Games and the North American Indigenous Games, the latter which was first proposed by the eminent Canadian Cree chief, Willie Littlechild, place a strong emphasis on peace and reconciliation in sport. They also emphasize the importance of culture. The Commonwealth Sports Declaration on Reconciliation and Partnership with Indigenous Peoples, for example, affirms the importance of celebrating languages, cultures, and histories. This is something I feel has been increasingly lost in the excessively commercial, modern version of the Olympic Games. Today, as broadcast rights sell for billions and are fueled by even greater advertising revenues, it's clear that the ideal of profit often takes precedence. It's striking to recall that the 1912 Stockholm Olympics featured competitions not just in athletics, but also in painting, sculpture, architecture, literature, and music. Indeed, competing under a pseudonym, de Coubertin himself won a gold medal for his poem, Ode to Sport. And I end with a quote from that poem. "O sport, you are peace. Through you, the young of the world will learn to respect one another, and thus the diversity of national traits becomes a source of generous and peaceful emulation." Hi, hi.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Alsobé.
Ça s'entend? Voilà, merci. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mesdames et Messieurs, la transparence, la responsabilité, l'inclusion, le respect des droits humains, de la démocratie et de l'état de droit sont les bases de la bonne gouvernance que tout pays, grand ou petit, devrait avoir dans tous les domaines, y compris celui du sport qui nous occupe aujourd'hui. La principauté d'Andorre, mon petit pays, a eu l'honneur d'accueillir il y a quelques semaines les Jeux des petits États d'Europe. Une semaine intense, marquée par la fraternité et la coopération qui unissent nos États, comme Monaco, Saint-Marin, Malte, Monténégro, Chypre, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein et l'Islande. Ces Jeux ont été l'occasion de réaffirmer notre engagement en tant que pays profondément attaché aux valeurs fondamentales du sport, le bien-être, le respect, l'inclusion et la cohésion sociale. Deux grands axes de coopération nous ont rassemblés et continueront à le faire pour orienter l'avenir de nos politiques sportives. D'une part, la sécurité et la protection de toutes les personnes dans le cadre de la pratique sportive. Les institutions ont le devoir d'agir avec fermeté pour garantir des environnements sportifs exempts de violence, d'abus et de discrimination. D'autre part, le sport doit être une source de bien-être, de vivre ensemble, de développement personnel, notamment pour les enfants et les jeunes générations. C'est pourquoi nous travaillons pour garantir l'universalité de l'accès aux activités physiques sportives. Le droit de pratiquer une activité physique tout au long de la vie devrait être une obligation dans les agendas de tous les politiciens. L'activité physique est essentielle non seulement pour la santé individuelle et collective, mais aussi pour la santé mentale, l'inclusion et la cohésion sociale. En ce sens, notre approche est transversale. Elle réunit les ministères des Affaires sociales, de la culture, de la jeunesse et des sports qui viennent de présenter au Parlement un projet de loi sur le sport, ainsi que le Comité olympique andorran et le Secrétariat d'État et d'égalité, entre d'autres, qui travaillent pour acquérir l'objectif qu'en 2027, l'Andorre devienne un pays 100% fit for life. Aucun enfant, aucune personne âgée en situation de handicap ou de vulnérabilité ne doit être exclu de ses droits fondamentaux liés au sport. Nous aspirons à promouvoir un sport sûr, inclusif, accessible à toutes et à tous, fondé sur l'égalité de genre à tous les niveaux, respectueux de l'environnement et affranchi de toute forme de discrimination, de manipulation ou de violence. Nous sommes donc convaincus que les petits États, en raison de leur taille et de la proximité entre les institutions et les citoyens, disposent d'un levier puissant pour impulser des avancées concrètes en matière de protection des droits humains et des libertés fondamentales dans le respect des valeurs européennes. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci. La parole est à Madame Pramer.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, sport has the power to inspire, but also the power to harm. That's why both reports we are discussing today share an essential insight. The responsibility for protecting human rights in sport cannot be left to sport alone. It is a public duty. Too often, we hear the argument of autonomy and neutrality. But let's be honest, when young athletes are sexually abused, when girls are excluded, when athletes face reprisals for speaking up, neutrality becomes a cover for neglect. States cannot look away. They have the duty to protect athletes from abuse, to ensure access to justice, and to make public funding of sport conditional on human rights standards. That includes independent safeguarding bodies, effective complaint procedure, and laws that make human rights due diligence mandatory for major events. The Olympic movement must also be held accountable. If a host country wages war or violates fundamental rights, allowing them to wrap themselves in the Olympic flag is not neutrality, it's whitewashing. Sport is not a parallel world. It is part of our societies and must be held the same standards. This Assembly has the tool to lead. Let's adopt both reports and send a clear message. Human dignity is not optional, not in politics, not in war, and not in sports. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Stamatis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to speak in Greece because we talk about the Olympic movement. So, κυρίες και κύριοι συνάδελφοι, καταρχήν θα ήθελα να συγχαρώ τους δύο εισηγητές και είναι μια πολύ καλή συγκυρία που έρχεται αυτή η έκθεση, μιας και εδώ και λίγο καιρό έχει δημιουργηθεί και η κοινοβουλευτική συμμαχία.
Monsieur Stamatis, il y a une traduction? Ok, oui, on attendait la traduction. On peut remettre à zéro et on recommence? On va reprendre, comme on vous a interrompu.
D'accord, merci.
Merci à vous.
Κυρίες και κύριοι συνάδελφοι, επιτρέψτε μου που μιλάω στα ελληνικά, μιας και μιλάμε για το Ολυμπιακό κίνημα και όλο αυτό που πρεσβεύουν οι Ολυμπιακοί Αγώνες. Να συγχαρώ τους εισηγητές για την έκθεση σε μια περίοδο που ταυτόχρονα η Κοινοβουλευτική Συνέλευση έχει και το δίκτυο που αφορά τη διαφάνεια και την καλή διακυβέρνηση στον αθλητισμό. No translation.
Sorry, we've got a problem with the translation. Could you do it in English?
Yeah, of course, of course.
We're sorry.
Okay. Dear colleagues, I would like first of all to congratulate the rapporteurs for this report, especially in the time that our parliamentary assembly has the new parliamentary network alliance for good governance and integrity sport, and this is very important. But we have to be clear in this room. When we're talking about the Olympic Games or the Olympic movement, it's not only the case about when we have wars in the time of Olympic Games. We have athletes that came from the countries with dictatorships. We have countries that don't recognize the Olympic movement. So I think it's very crucial, not from the ethical type to go to the lawyer type. So when we have the war, not any of these countries not to be accepted in the Olympic Games. For me, it is very, very crucial because in our days, you have to see we don't have only the Olympic movement. We have the Paralympic movement. So we have to fight from the equality to give the people with disabilities to be members of the Olympic movement. And I think it's very important that the new president of International Olympic Committee is a woman. This is a signal to us for International Olympic Committee how to see the next days, the next years for the Olympic movement. And I think it's very important to talk about the equal opportunities. Equal opportunities came when we have democracy in our countries. So I think it's very important when we talk about the Olympic movement to talk about democracy. And this is, for us, for the Council of Europe, it's very crucial for the next years how to support our countries to be more democratic countries with rule of law, with human rights for all. And then, in the end of the day, we have the Olympic movement in the day of the Olympic Games. Thank you.
Merci et désolé encore pour l'interruption. La parole est à Madame Schuss.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, sport and the Olympic movement in particular has long stood as a symbol of peace, dialogue and mutual respect among nations. But in a world increasingly marked by conflict and instability, we must ask ourselves the difficult but necessary question: does the principle of neutrality in sport still serve the core values it claims to uphold: fairness, human dignity, and peace? Neutrality and autonomy are essential principles in sport. They safeguard fairness, ensure global participation, and protect sport from political exploitation. When these principles are cast aside, sport risks becoming a tool of division rather than unity. My party firmly believes that sport must remain above politics. Let us be unequivocal. We condemn all acts of war and aggression, but we also draw a vital distinction between those who make political decisions and those who dedicate their lives to sport. It is not the athlete who commands armies. It is not the athlete who drafts policies of oppression. It is the athlete who trains, who competes, who inspires, across borders, beyond ideologies. Why should athletes not serve as symbols of unity in times of division? Should they not embody the very peace and reconciliation that the Olympic Charter proclaims? We hold that athletes, regardless of their nationality, must be allowed to compete under the national flag, even in times of geopolitical tensions. Denying them this right undermines not only the unifying spirit of sport, but also punishes individuals for the actions of their governments, actions over which they have no control. We do not believe that excluding individual athletes based on nationality will bring us any closer to peace. It is neither just nor effective. It risks turning sport into a tool of division rather than a vehicle for unity and understanding. If we are serious about honoring the ancient Greek tradition of ekecheira, the Olympic truce, when we must do more than commemorate it in words. Ekecheira was not symbolic, it was binding, a sacred commitment among warring states to suspend hostilities during the Games. Let us have the courage to act in the same spirit. As rightly stated in the report, sport has an undeniable economic weight, and it will increasingly become an instrument of economic pressure. This reality makes one thing clear. Sport is not, and has perhaps never truly has been, neutral. But instead of lamenting this fact, why not turn it into a constructive opportunity? Let us be brave and send a clear political message. The Olympic Games should only be held under conditions of peace, for instance, within the framework of a verified ceasefire. Such a condition would not only uphold the moral integrity of the Games, but would also generate significant macroeconomic and diplomatic leverage, capable of influencing political decisions where it truly counts. Of course, we must also acknowledge the other side of this equation. All athletes would be affected. This in contrast to what I just mentioned earlier. But perhaps, in the name of peace and shared responsibility, this temporary sacrifice could become a symbol of global solidarity, a unified call to end violence and to restore peace. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Rushworth.
Thank you. Sport, as we all know, has the power to promote health and fitness, to teach our children values like hard work, fairness, teamwork, humility, and has the power to bring people together, to build up friendships across divides, and to unify nations, as we saw when South Africa hosted the 1995 World Cup, or indeed the Christmas Day truce football match during the First World War. We've seen how sport can be a platform for promoting equal rights, such as Tommy Smith and John Carlos's raised black glove at the 1968 Olympics. But sport has also been used to abuse, to exclude, and to distract. We must guard against sports washing. And in my opinion, without denying the power of sport to bring nations together, and despite those differences, there've got to be some lines drawn. Think of the example of Saudi Arabia, whose Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told Fox News, if sports washing is going to increase my GDP by 1%, then we'll continue sports washing. Research by Play the Game identified 910 Saudi sponsorships in global sports and 1,412 positions across Saudi entities since 2024. And this expansion is not about sport. It's a strategy to improve the kingdom's image. It's a facade to cloak Saudi Arabia's serious human rights abuses, discrimination against women and girls and people who identify as LGBT, to cloak unfair trials and torture in detention and oppression and execution for juvenile offences. And what hits really close to home is Newcastle United being bought by the kingdom. And all I can say is that I hope Sunderland get 6 points against them this season. Many states within this council supported Qatar's bid to host the 2022 World Cup, which has been dubbed the Death Games due to the death of migrant workers building the stadiums. Amnesty International reported 15,000 deaths, and while this figure is disputed, and I won't litigate that argument, what is not in any doubt is that migrant workers from countries like Nepal and Bangladesh had their passports seized, so they were left with no choice but to live in overcrowded conditions and work long hours in intense heat for poverty wages. And that's why I welcome this report and its recommendation to put human rights and human dignity back at the heart of sport and not leave it to the sports governing bodies themselves to police these important values. Friends, it falls to us.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Mullen. Monsieur Mullen. Donc, orateur suivant, Madame Tanguy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le sport porte un idéal universel, inclusion, respect, dignité. Mais derrière les cérémonies d'unité et les émotions de victoire, il existe des réalités que nous ne pouvons plus ignorer. Les deux projets de résolution que nous examinons aujourd'hui rappellent une exigence simple. Le sport ne peut rester indifférent face aux abus, aux discriminations, ni aux violations des droits fondamentaux. La France a engagé des réformes concrètes. L'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes, grande cause nationale depuis 2017, s'est traduite par des politiques sportives ambitieuses. Égalité salariale, parité dans les instances, lutte contre les violences sexistes et sexuelles. Dans le cadre des Jeux Olympiques de Paris, plusieurs textes ont été adoptés. La loi du 2 mars 2022 pour démocratiser le sport, qui renforce la parité et la formation des éducateurs. La loi du 19 mai 2023, qui impose à toutes les fédérations de mettre en place des cellules de signalement, un référent intégrité et des dispositifs de protection des mineurs avec un système de reporting sécurisé. Et le plan national de prévention des violences qui a été renforcé en 2023 et qui rend ces actions obligatoires et systématiques. J'ai eu l'occasion de présenter ces avancées lors de la conférence qui s'est tenue en Grèce en novembre 2024 sur la sécurité, l'intégrité et l'inclusion dans le sport. J'y ai insisté sur la nécessité de prévenir les violences et de protéger les mineurs en amont comme en aval. Le rapport de M. Kim Valentin propose des mesures fortes. Tolérance zéro pour les abus, gouvernance éthique, soutien aux victimes et création d'une entité mondiale indépendante. Le rapport de M. Jensen nous rappelle que la neutralité du sport ne doit pas servir de prétexte à l'inaction, notamment face au régime autoritaire. Ces deux résolutions convergent vers un même impératif. Le sport ne peut être en marge du droit, de la morale et des valeurs démocratiques. Il est urgent d'en faire un levier d'action de justice et d'intégrité, un espace sûr, éthique et inclusif. Dès lors, une question s'impose à nous. Comment le Conseil de l'Europe peut-il continuer à avancer de manière concrète pour faire de cette ambition une réalité durable? Je vous remercie.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Robertson. Monsieur Robertson. Orateur suivant, la parole est à Madame Mitova.
Thank you, Chairman. Distinguished colleagues, the Olympic movement was created to unite, promote peace, and ensure fair competition. But today we face a serious conflict that challenges one of sport's core values, equality. And I do not understand the meaning of equality, as most of you do, apparently. The inclusion of trans women, individuals born male who have transitioned into women's categories raises concerns. We cannot ignore the physical advantages linked to male biology, which persist even after hormone therapy. This creates unfair and, at times, disturbingly unsafe conditions for female athletes. I'm a woman, I perceive myself as a woman, and believe me when I tell you, I will not appreciate more gender identity if a biological male with pink shorts beats me to death on a boxing ring because today he, she, it, I don't even know anymore, decides it is better to feel as a woman and not face the consequences of being a total loser in his own category. Neutrality must not mean silence in the face of injustice. It must not be used to justify political correctness and liberal pseudo-ideology that undermines the very foundations of sport. Bulgaria was among the first to officially oppose trans participation in Olympic boxing. We therefore call on the Council of Europe to support fairness based on biological reality, protection of women's categories in sport, and to put a stop on this political nonsense. This is not about discrimination. It is about real equality rooted in science, fairness, and the respect of all athletes. Let us have the courage to speak the truth. Through peace and tolerance come through reason and common sense, and not denial of reality and distortion of biology. Thank you.
La parole est à Monsieur Azipoglou.
I am speaking on behalf of Turkish Cypriot young people, young athletes, and I would like to thank Rapporteur Mr. Valentin for the title of this report, because it is protecting human rights in and through sports, obligations and shared responsibilities. Unfortunately, we couldn't protect the Turkish Cypriot people sports rights through politics. We, as Turkish Cypriot people who had voted positively all the previous United Nations unification plans, unfortunately, we are the ones who are being penalized and under isolations and restrictions. Remember, in 2004, there was a referendum. Turkish Cypriot side, Greek Cypriot side had voted whether we can unite the island again or not. Turkish Cypriot people voted positively, 65%. Greek Cypriot side voted 75% no. They become European Union member, and we Turkish Cypriots unfortunately stayed outside the European Union and other organizations. And that's why this title is very important, protecting human rights in and through sports. So we should be able to achieve this through sports because we failed to achieve it through politics. Remember, even this very assembly in its resolutions 1376 adopted in 2004, this assembly has made a call, and I quote, "The Turkish Cypriots' international isolations must cease." Although more than 2 decades have passed since this resolution was adopted, the Turkish Cypriot people and athletes continue to face barriers to engagement with the international community, even in the field of sports. Their rightful participation in international sporting events remains obstructed, further deepening their unjust isolations. We are not asking for anything political. We are asking for fairness. We demand to take in international sports platforms. Unfortunately, when international federations and organizations block these young people, they send a message to them: you don't matter, your dreams are not valid. This assembly must not stay silent. It is time to find solutions that open the doors of sports to the Turkish Cypriot people as well. Sports should build bridges not walls. Let the Turkish Cypriot athletes compete. Thank you very much.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Akaline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, first of all, I must congratulate the rapporteurs for these extensive reports. There are many excellent suggestions within the reports to be taken seriously and actions to be taken by all the relevant governing bodies and stakeholders. Sport is one of the most powerful tools that can unite people beyond borders, languages, and ideologies. At its best, sport represents fairness, respect, and integrity, values that are central to democratic societies. But for sport to continue to inspire, it must be protected from threats that undermine its neutrality and values. We cannot ignore that discrimination, violence, and human rights violations persist in the world of sports. These issues not only affect fans, but especially harm athletes who often bear the burden of political and social tensions. Maintaining neutrality in sport is not about being silent in the face of injustice, but about ensuring that all individuals can participate equally and safely. Gender equality remains a critical issue. Female athletes must have equal opportunities, pay, and recognition. Similarly, the protection of athletes and players, including mental health support and safeguarding, especially women, children, and vulnerable against abuse, must be a priority for all governing bodies. Match fixing and illegal bettings are another serious threat to the integrity of sport. It erodes trust, damages reputations, and betrays the very essence of competition. Upholding strong legal frameworks and cross-border cooperation is essential to fighting these crimes. We must continue to champion these principles by supporting legislation and initiatives that reinforce fairness, transparency, and inclusion. We defend not just the purity of sport, but the values of our shared humanity. Let us ensure that sport remains a space where human dignity is upheld, everyone is welcome, and excellence is achieved not through exploitation, but through the respect and equal opportunity. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Natalouka. Monsieur Natalouka. Je donne la parole à Madame Rood.
Honorable colleagues, for decades, female athletes have fought hard to be treated like their male peers, whether in terms of resources for amateurs or salaries and prize money for professionals. Unacceptable disparities have long existed and many persist. Thankfully, with the growing popularity of women's sports, that is starting to change. In other respects, however, female athletes remain just as, if not more, vulnerable than before. Nearly 21% of professional female athletes report having experienced sexual abuse as a child in sport, and almost double that rate among their male athletes. Female athletes are also more likely to report anxiety, depression, and disordered eating. Clearly, more must be done to ensure that girls and women can safely participate in sports that they love. But safe participation isn't just about protection from abuse and mental health support. It also means fair and safe competition. The UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, Reem Al-Salim, has noted that female athletes are more vulnerable to sustaining serious physical injuries when female-only sports spaces are open to males. She cites evidence from volleyball, basketball, and football, or as we call it in Canada, soccer. As a result, she recommended that female categories in organized sport be exclusively accessible to persons whose biological sex is female, in order to safeguard equal opportunities for women and girls. And I couldn't agree more. I was encouraged to see World Boxing recently announce that it will introduce mandatory sex testing to determine the eligibility of male and female athletes in its competitions. It's about ensuring women are safe, protected, and able to compete on a level playing field. Now let me turn to the second half of today's joint debate on whether sport neutrality is serving our values. The report rightly notes that some governments use major sporting events as a means of asserting their power and gaining influence and prestige. This is certainly true, though I would also have welcomed an explicit reference to sport washing, when authoritarian hosts use sport to whitewash their human rights abuses. Nonetheless, I support the report's recommendations that the International Olympic Committee verify that a host country's political vision is compatible with Olympism and its values. Olympism, as defined by the Olympic Charter, is a philosophy that respects internationally recognized human rights. If we are to take the recommendation seriously, we must put our money where our mouths are. We must refuse to award major sporting events to countries that systemically violate human rights. Thank you.
Merci. La parole est à Monsieur Cazet.
Apologies. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on the subject that matters to Ireland and to all of Europe, the role of the Olympic movement in promoting peace, and whether the idea of neutrality in sport is truly helping us live up to the values we claim to hold. The Olympic Games are more than just a sporting event. They are meant to bring people together to celebrate fairness, respect and unity. The Olympic truce, which asks countries to stop fighting during games, is a powerful symbol of that hope. But when Russia invaded Ukraine, even during the Olympic period, that symbol was broken. Ireland, like many of our European neighbours, could not stay silent, and we took a clear stand. We said that Russia and Belarus athletes should not be allowed to compete internationally while their governments were violating peace and international law. This is not about politics. It's about protecting the values of sport itself. We backed up our words with action. Irish sport organisations opened their doors to Ukrainian athletes. Sports halls became shelters. Coaches and volunteers stepped in, which showed that sports can be a force for good, not just on the field, but in our communities. But now as we approach the next Olympics, we face the difficult question. Some athletes from certain countries will be allowed to compete under the so-called neutral flag. What does that really mean? And can we say sport is neutral when we allow those who break the peace to take part without consequences? Neutrality sounds fair, but in practice it can sometimes mean looking the other way. And when we look the other way in the face of injustice, we risk losing the very heart of what sport is supposed to stand for. The Council of Europe has made strong recommendations. These include meeting the Olympic truce as a real condition for taking part in the Games, protecting athletes who speak out for peace, and making sure human rights are respected in sports. These are not extreme ideas, but they are common sense. Ireland has shown how you can stand for justice and still succeed. In 2024, we had our most successful Olympics year yet. Our athletes brought home more medals than ever, but more importantly, they brought home pride. They showed that Irish sport is built on values, fairness, courage and the community. We support our athletes not just in training, but with care. Programmes like the International Carding Scheme and the Athletes Care Transition Programme help them to grow as people, not just as performers. That's what real sporting success looks like. For me, sport has always been about more than the medals. It's about the meaning. The Olympic flame is not just a symbol, it's a light that should guide us even in dark times. Let's make sure neutrality doesn't mean silence, but solidarity. Thank you.
Mira Nianimen is next.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, sport should unite people, not divide them. Sport must not be a tool for politics, but neither should it be an area of silence or fear. The freedom of expression of athletics and their right to defend human rights must be protected. Political neutrality cannot and must not mean moral indifference. The essence of sport is community, respect and fair competition. It is our responsibility to ensure that countries hosting international sporting events are committed to human rights, not just in words, but in actions. Human rights violations must lead to concentrate sanctions. As the report states, those who commit violations should be brought to justice, not allowed to hide behind the Olympic flag. There can be no grey areas here. Systematic abuse of children and vulnerable adults of particular concern. Physiological, physical and sexual violence, harassment, subjugation and coercion are the dark side of sport. Not the dark side of sport, but issues we prevent and address. It is unacceptable that such violence are enabled by a culture of silence, impunity and weak legal protection. Every child has a right to a safe environment for the hobbies. We must also ensure that support personnel have clear responsibilities, proper training and background checks, especially in clubs and coaching. This is proactive accountability. Finally, I want to speak about fairness in sport. Equality does not mean abandoning biological realities. It means recognizing the right of different groups of the fair competition. Women have the right to compete against women. That is not discrimination. It is a prerequisite for fair play. Mr. President, at its best, sport is the most powerful common language in the world. But when we allow unjust abuse or silence, we break that core promise. Let us work together to ensure that sport truly is a safe, just and dignity-respecting space for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. Dear colleagues, I have to interrupt now the list of speakers. I just want to remind to the speakers who didn't have the opportunity to take the floor during this debate that they can table their speech to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that the typewritten text can be submitted electronically if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. I now call Mr. Jensen to reply. Mogens, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, colleagues, I think, for a very substantial discussion on the two reports, and of course, especially, I will direct my words to my report, and thank you also for some questions raised. I think the very, very important thing to outline here is that sport is not superior to international conventions and treaties. The obligation to fully respect the international human standards and rights, they must take precedence over the need to ensure the political neutrality of sport, and the concept of autonomy of sport does not shield the sports organizations from accountability when they fail to protect human dignity and human rights. I think this is a very essential result also after the debate we have had today. There has been raised questions. I cannot, due to time, comment all of them, but I would say that Ms. Dallas was talking about religious neutrality. And I would say there that neutrality is not conflicting with the promotion of human rights and peace. And this applies, for me to say, to all religious views and also across cultural differences. Several colleagues, especially from Ukraine, but also others, of course, raise the question, can athletes from a country that have imposed a war on another country participate in Olympic sport events? We have had this discussion. And my view, as it's also reflected in the report, is quite clearly that in these circumstances there is a possibility and should be a possibility to ban athletes from at all participating in Olympic activities. And I agree very much with the colleagues that has emphasized that. And then just to Leslie Griffiths, my good colleague, about grassroots and elite sport, I totally agree that this is one branch. We should at the same time, of course, support our grassroots sports organizations and the sports at local level at the same time as we support elite. That's two things of the same kind. So thank you very much for the warm welcome of my report. Now it's not to hide this away in committee meetings and so on. I call on all of you and also of the governments.
Thank you, Mogens.
To use your possibilities now to make this happen also in reality. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mogens. Kim Valentin, you have 3 minutes to reply.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to all your fine interventions. I have heard them all. I will take them on with me to the work we are continuing on this report on human rights in and through sports. I would like to use my last minutes to congratulate the great work that many of you actually have done already on this issue, but also emphasize that when we look at the future, it's not words, it is actual change that we need. That's what we heard in the last couple of years from all the hearings we held before we wrote this report. I remember in London, the hearing in London in '23, I remember the quite terrible stories told by people who have been abused in sports. People like legends like Patrick Abela. I remember telling myself that this report would have to be the change. I still feel the same. So I have a request for you. I have the request that could you help me doing that? We have formed the Sport Alliance, and I think with your very good remarks towards this report, I think you should join the alliance. You should join the change. You should join the action plan for actually doing more than the words we wrote in this report. We have a brilliant chance of actually doing something about it, because I can hear that we are on the same page. We want change. Sport is not just sport. For many children and youngsters, it is a dream of a future, of a better future. So let's make a lot of these dreams come true. Sports must be governed by humanity, transparency, and integrity. Let us lead that change. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Linda Hofstadt-Helledaut, as chair of the committee, do you want to reply? If yes, you have 3 minutes.
President, colleagues, it is with deep pride and unwavering conviction that I rise to support the two important reports presented today. Both were adopted anonymously by our committee after 2 years of robust hearings, wide consultants, and meaningful engagement with athletes, sport bodies, human rights defenders, and national authorities. And colleagues, these are not just reports. They are a call to action, a blueprint for safeguarding the dignity, safety, and rights of all who participate in sport. They urge us to face uncomfortable truths and to reform structures that have for too long tolerated silence, impunity, and exclusions. Sport should inspire and unite, not harm or divide. Yet we have heard testimonies of abuse, discrimination, and political exploitation. We have seen how athletes are silenced, how neutrality is distorted, how vulnerable groups are left without protection. Our Assembly cannot accept this, and I believe we are showing that we will not. Together, these reports make a powerful case for change. They call for the integration of binding human rights standards into every level of sport governance, from grassroots clubs to the organization of mega events. They urge good governance in sport, protection for whistleblowers, and safeguards for children and marginalized groups. They demand that neutrality never be used as a shield for complicity. They reaffirm that athletes are not just competitors, they are human beings, right holders, and voices of consciences. It is time to move from promises to systems of accountability. And that is why I am especially proud that just weeks ago we launched the Parliamentary Alliance for Good Governance and Integrity in Sport. And I hope you all will join that. Let me also pay tribute to FIFA's important role and commend them for their willingness to strengthen cooperation with PACE going forward in order to achieve our common goals. I would especially like to emphasize the open and honest dialogue we have had in the recent times with FIFA, not least through our work related to the upcoming football World Cups and our visit to FIFA's leadership in Zurich. It's more important than ever to have a close and constructive cooperation going forward. So, colleagues, the reports before us today represent the best of our Assembly's work, principled, practical, and grounded in our shared commitment to human rights. Let's adapt them with clarity and unity, and let us ensure that every athlete, every child, and every citizen knows that this Assembly stands for safe, fair, and human-centered sport. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Thank you, Linda. The debate is closed, dear colleagues. As part of the report, Protecting Human Rights in and through Sports, Obligations and Shared Responsibilities, the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media has presented a draft resolution to which one amendment has been tabled, and a draft recommendation to which no amendments have been tabled. I understand that Mrs. Luz Martinez-Eyo would like to withdraw Amendment 1 in favor of an oral amendment of conciliation. Is that so, Ms. Eyo? Yes, thank you. Amendment 1 is therefore withdrawn. I've been informed by the committee of an oral amendment as follows. In the draft resolution, paragraph 5.3, replace the words ensure the appointment of child safeguarding officers in sport federations with the words ensure the appointment of child safeguarding officers by sport federations. In my opinion, the oral amendment meets the criteria of Rule 34.7, paragraph A. Any opposition to this amendment being debated? No. I give the floor to Kim Valentin to speak in favor of the oral amendment. You have 30 seconds. Kim. Okay, this is enough.
Yes.
You are in favor, thank you. Is anyone against? No. I consider that the committee is in favor. I put the oral amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. It is agreed. So we will now proceed to the vote on the draft resolution as amended, contained in document 16196. A simple majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The draft resolution in document 16196 is adopted. We will now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in document 16196. I remind you that a two-thirds majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The draft recommendation in document 16196 is adopted. As part of the report, the Olympic movement and peacekeeping is sport neutrality serving sport values, the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media has presented a draft resolution to which one amendment has been tabled. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendment 1 to the draft resolution, which was rejected by the committee with a two-thirds majority, be declared as definitely rejected. Is that so, Linda? Right. Yes, it is. If no objects, I will consider the amendment to be rejected. An objection? No. No. So the last part, we will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution as amended, contained in document 16185. A simple majority is required. The vote is now open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The draft resolution in document 16185 is adopted. Colleagues, please remain seated. In a minute, the Prime Minister of Malta will enter the hemicycle and address the Assembly. In the meantime, allow me to welcome in this hemicycle today two former Secretary General of the Council of Europe who make us the honor of being with us, with you. Madame Maria Pecinovic-Buric, Secretary General from 2019 to 2024, and Mr. Daniel Tassis, Secretary General from 1994 to 1999. And I also welcome our former president, Mr. Tini Cox. Thank you all for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is my great honor to welcome His Excellency Mr. Robert Abela, Prime Minister of Malta, who will address the Assembly for the first time today. This year, Malta is celebrating the 60th anniversary of its membership of the Council of Europe. This is a time, therefore, to reflect on all that has been achieved, but also to look forward and prepare for a new generation of human rights. We had a most interesting exchange of views yesterday with the Deputy Prime Minister Boz, who I'm happy to welcome once again to the hemicycle today, and of course with the Prime Minister just a few minutes earlier in my office. Prime Minister, we look forward to continuing our collaboration with you and your government to advance our shared goals, both during Malta's presidency of the Committee of Ministers and beyond. Dear Prime Minister, you took office in January 2020, and so your first task was to guide your country through the global pandemic, a challenge requiring strong leadership and clear communication with the people of Malta. These qualities remain more vital than ever at this critical time in our organization's history, as the core values of our institution are being increasingly challenged. We look forward to hearing your message today, after which you have kindly accepted to answer questions from our parliamentarians. So, without further ado, Prime Minister, I call you to take the floor.
President of the Parliamentary Assembly, Secretary General of the Council of Europe, former Secretary Generals, distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies, esteemed visitors, and of course, our esteemed youth. It is indeed a true privilege to address this Assembly for the first time, an occasion made all the more significant as it coincides with Malta's fourth presidency of the Committee of Ministers, as well as its 60th anniversary as a proud member of this pertinent organization. Just 7 months after gaining independence in 1964, Malta found in the Council of Europe a natural home, one which united us with others in our aspirations for peace and respect for fundamental human rights, democracy, and of course, the rule of law. Our steadfast commitment to dialogue and multilateralism has always shaped our foreign policy. In fact, Malta has long punched above its weight in international peace building, guided by its constitutional neutrality and active neutrality and strong commitment to multilateralism. from the 1989 Malta Summit, which has been widely regarded as the symbolic end of the Cold War, to launching the 5+5 Western Mediterranean dialogue, from hosting the 2015 Valletta Summit on the sensitive topic of migration, which led to the EU Emergency Trust Fund for Africa, to hosting the third Ukraine Peace Formula talks, bringing together over 65 countries to advance President Zelensky's peace formula, from our recent role as member of the United Nations Security Council to being appointed as chairperson in office of the OSCE, where Malta secured consensus on the top 4 leadership positions, as well as on the 2026 chairpersonship. Malta continues to position itself as a bridge between regions and to prove that small states can indeed lead in shaping peace. And this commitment remains not just central, but essential in today's geopolitical context. Today, we are confronted by a cascade of interlocking crises that threaten democracy and human rights like never before. Democratic backsliding, rising authoritarianism, shrinking civic space, and the alarming surge in hate speech and hate crimes that together threaten the very fabric of open societies, while economic and climate changes deepen inequalities. These challenges demand a united, principled, and strategic response. No nation, no matter its size, can thrive in isolation or remain disengaged from the responsibilities of the global community. Against this backdrop, the Council of Europe has a vital role to play in providing a framework for collective solutions. It was, in fact, this very organization that, way back in 1949, first championed the vision of European unity, and it must remain our guiding compass as we continue to pursue that enduring goal. Ever since joining the Council of Europe, Malta's engagement and active participation has deepened, driven by a profound dedication to progress and a strong commitment to upholding its core values. Our firm resolve has been reflected in sustained, open, constructive, and meaningful dialogue with the Venice Commission, Greco, Maneval, and many other key bodies. Guided by their expertise and technical knowledge, Malta has benefited from valuable advice while undertaking far-reaching reforms, which I made a top priority when becoming Prime Minister way back in January of 2020. Significant achievements in strengthening institutional integrity and constitutional reforms and safeguards include the restructuring of the Office of the Attorney General in Malta, the overhaul of the judicial appointments system, where government has absolutely no say today in the appointment of our judiciary, and the expanded powers of the Office of the Ombudsman and the Permanent Commission Against Corruption. In parallel, we have worked hard to bolster the capacity, the independence, and the accountability of institutions responsible for the oversight and management of public resources. And we have also redoubled our efforts in combating money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Public safety remains also a cornerstone of our government's agenda. We fully recognize the essential role that journalists play in a healthy democracy. Their work informs the public, fosters transparency, and strengthens our institutions. Yet, due to the nature of their profession, journalists often face heightened risks. It is our duty to ensure their protection, not just in principle, but also in practice. Malta has implemented a series of robust reforms to strengthen legal safeguards and institutional protection for journalists. We were also the first EU member state to implement the anti-SLAPP directive into national law. And this was not by chance. It is part of our broader commitment to ensure that journalists can work freely and safely. And we will continue on this path with more administrative and legislative reforms. The safety of journalists is high on our international agenda. Earlier today, I also had the privilege of signing a series of voluntary contributions, including support for the Council's platform for the safety of journalists, an initiative that reflects our international commitment to this important cause. As government, we have been, are, and will remain steadfast in our commitment to the safety and protection of journalists. Only a few days ago, the Criminal Court of Malta, following a trial by jury, found another 2 people guilty of the assassination of Daphne Caruana Galizia and condemned them both to life imprisonment. Justice is indeed being served. The recent targeting and killing of journalists in conflict zones around the world illustrates the dangerous environment in which media professionals operate today. These acts are not only attacks on individuals, they are attacks on the very principles of media freedom and pluralism that underpin democratic societies. We call on all stakeholders to recognize the urgent need to protect journalists and safeguard their ability to report freely without fear or intimidation. Distinguished members, the threats to safety and dignity in our societies extend beyond the media sphere. Across the globe and across all walks of life, women continue to bear the brunt of violence and discrimination. 1 in 3 women, in fact, experience physical or sexual violence during their lifetime. And we continue to witness its lethal manifestation of femicide across our continent. A brutal reminder that violence against women remains a pervasive crisis that no country is immune to. That is why Malta, under my watch, a few months ago, took the step of introducing the concept of femicide into our criminal code, to acknowledge this gender-based crime, raising public awareness, and to send a very clear and unequivocal message that there will be no leniency for perpetrators of this horrific crime. Yet, legal recognition is not enough. That's why we are also committed to empowering women, to support their participation in public and political life, enable them to pursue and advance in their careers, and also secure financial independence. Among other measures, in Malta, we provide free childcare and have introduced a gender quota in our parliament, aimed at breaking down structural barriers and normalizing women's participation in political decision-making. Just yesterday, we marked the International Women in Diplomacy Day, on which I am proud to note that Malta's recent historic roles on the multilateral front at the United Nations Security Council, at the OSCE, and here at the Council of Europe, have all been led by female ambassadors. Their leadership is a testament to the indispensable contributions of women in diplomacy. Distinguished members, 2 years ago at the Reykjavik Summit, alongside my counterparts, we reaffirmed our commitment to standing in unwavering solidarity with Ukraine in the face of Russia's brutal aggression. The register of damages has since then been established and operationalized. Negotiations on the Claims Commission are well advancing. The action plan for Ukraine's resilience, recovery, and reconstruction is producing real and tangible outcomes on the ground. The consultation group on the children of Ukraine is indeed also making a difference in protecting and supporting the displaced children. And the necessary preparations for the establishment of the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine are progressing rapidly, with the Maltese presidency's unwavering support. We are, in fact, looking forward to this evening's signing of the bilateral agreement between the Council of Europe and Ukraine. From the onset of this war of aggression, Malta has stood firmly with the brave Ukrainian people. Already now, for more than 3 years, Ukrainians have not only defended their sovereignty, but at the same time have defended the core principles upon which this same organization is founded. And so, no matter the obstacles that we face and new challenges that from time to time arise, we cannot waver in our support for Ukraine. We must continue in our efforts to secure a peace that is just and lasting, a peace that honors the values that we strive to protect and uphold. And such a just and lasting peace must also reach beyond our continent and to our doorstep, where grave and unbearable human suffering persists as the humanitarian catastrophe continues to unfold in the Middle East, with an ever-worsening situation in the Gaza Strip. We cannot turn a blind eye. We cannot stay silent. The international community must unite to stop the bloodshed, uphold international law, and urgently call for de-escalation. It is only through collective action and a return to diplomacy that we can ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches all those in need, and that an enduring peace is reached that honors the equal rights of Israelis and Palestinians to dignity, peaceful coexistence, and security. Distinguished members, across our societies, it is young people who are most often standing up for human dignity. Their voice is not only vital, it is transformative. Recognizing their role means giving them real space at the table as equal partners to shape a more just and democratic future. For Malta, it was only natural to put youth empowerment at the center of our presidency, because we take great pride in entrusting young people with real responsibility, from the youngest head of delegation in the Parliamentary Assembly to the youngest European Union Commissioner and the youngest ambassador leading the Committee of Ministers with the support of a dynamic young team. Malta believes in youth, it truly does. And not just as the future, but as leaders that drive today's change. We also have set up in the last months a youth cabinet of ministers known as the Youth Advisory Forum, which consults and advises the formal cabinet of ministers. And that is why we are convinced from our own experience that lowering the voting age to 16 is a logical and necessary step that leads to a stronger and more representative democracy. This isn't just, however, about rights. It's about tangible results. Voting early builds lifelong habits. When young people vote while they are still at school and receiving their education, it creates a powerful link between education and a strong sense of civic action and responsibility. It's an investment in active citizenship and in a democracy that listens, includes, and lasts. But youth participation alone is not enough. It must be matched by systems that deliver the rule of law, independent and resilient institutions, real accountability, and an information environment where truth can prevail over disinformation. That is the core of democratic resilience, after all. Not just the ability to ensure disruption, to endure disruption, but the capacity to resist manipulation, safeguard core values, and rebuild trust where it falters. Those ideas do not exist in a vacuum. They are given structure and coherence by legal frameworks, such as the European Convention on Human Rights. This convention, which we are proudly celebrating this year, its 75th anniversary during our presidency, is, however, more than just a legal instrument. It is a shared foundation for democratic life in Europe, a unifying expression of our commitment to dignity, justice, and also freedom. And the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights help translate those principles into practice. Their impact extends beyond individual cases, setting clear limits on power and affirming that rights and responsibilities are rooted in law and not political whim. Executing the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights is thus vital to preserve the credibility, the integrity, and the effectiveness of the Convention system and obligation, which we hold in the highest regard. In fact, it was a pivotal case before the European Court of Human Rights way back in 2010, Joe and Cassar versus Malta, that had served way back as a reality check for my country about our shortcomings when it came to the rights of the LGBTIQ+ community. Guided by our deep commitment to equality, Malta had embraced that judgment years after as an opportunity to lead by example and undertook a series of vital reforms to address the identified gaps. And today, we are proud that Malta is widely recognized as a global leader in protecting LGBTIQ rights and has in fact ranked as #1 on the ILGA Rainbow Map for a number of consecutive years. Yet, our achievements must never give way to complacency. Our work continues, driven by a vision of a fairer, more inclusive, and more just Europe, one that puts dignity, equality, and mutual respect at its core, where our experience reminds us that no nation is too small to shape the direction of our shared future and our shared future. And no global challenge can be met without genuine and bold cooperation. With more than 220 conventions, the Council of Europe remains a cornerstone of legal standards in Europe and, of course, beyond as well. These are not just European frameworks. They are global standards influencing legislation far beyond our borders. But global challenges require a global reach. That's why we must amplify the voice of the Council of Europe beyond Europe itself. At a time of rising global divisions, the North-South Center of the Council of Europe, which Malta proudly chairs, serves as a bridge to keep dialogue alive between different cultures and regions. And we strongly encourage all member states who have not yet done so to join the center to strengthen global cooperation grounded in the Council's values. Distinguished members, while the path forward may be demanding, and it indeed is, we are convinced that through unity, resilience, and clarity of purpose, we can transform challenges into opportunities and vision into reality. We are proud to champion the Secretary General's bold democratic pact for Europe as a crucial step towards shaping a future that reflects our shared vision, towards shaping a future that the next generations will be proud to inherit. I wish to conclude by underlining that for Malta, multilateralism is not a slogan. It is a strategic choice and a political imperative which will continue to uphold as the foundation for effective global cooperation and, perhaps even more importantly, lasting peace. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Prime Minister. As you know, the procedure is that we will first hear questions from the speakers on behalf of the political groups, and then we'll hear a response from the Prime Minister of Malta to those questions. I would like to ask the speakers to limit their intervention to 30 seconds, and colleagues should ask questions and not make speeches. So we'll give first the floor to the speaker on behalf of the Socialists, Greens and Democrats, Bisera Konstantinovska-Stojewska. Bisera.
Thank you, Mr. President. Respected Prime Minister, As a frontline state at the crossroads of the Mediterranean, Malta is often among the first to feel the impact of regional crisis, particularly in relation to illegal migration. How can we best address these challenges? Thank you.
Thank you, Bishara. Prime Minister, would you like to respond? Just a minute, Prime Minister.
Okay. Good. Thank you for your question, first of all, which I believe is a very pertinent one, particularly in the light of the letter which was sent a few days ago by 9 member states of the European Union to the Council of Europe. Migration is a very sensitive topic. It stopped working?
No, it's back.
No, we're back in action. Thank you. So we're dealing with one of the most sensitive topics in the sense that on the one part, we're dealing with humanitarian tragedies, and I'll explain why. Let's discuss the southern Mediterranean route, of which Malta is a frontline country. How do you explain a boat having a maximum carrying capacity of 10 people, having 40 people on board, young children, babies, mothers, and attempting to cross a distance of 200 nautical miles in inclement weather? Nobody would do that unless they're in a desperate situation. So that's one facade of the issue. The second part, the other side of the coin, is the interests of each and every country. Going back to the early months of 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, Malta had faced a huge migratory crisis. So what was happening? People were leaving Libya and Tunisia, boats after boats after boats. We had our ports closed, our airports closed due to the health restrictions. And yet, hundreds of migrants were making their way into our harbors. And we had a whole population who was exasperated against us as government. The population couldn't understand, and rightly so, how we were blocking our ports to tourism, to essential cargo as well on occasion, but at the same time opening our ports to migration. So those are the two sides of the coin, which I'm sure you can appreciate, and the difficulties that we face each and every day as leaders of our countries. The recent uprisings in Libya have once again led to an increase in migratory flows. So what are the solutions? The realities are what I have just explained. I had visited Lampedusa a few months ago, and what one can see is impressive, boat after boat entering their harbor. The solutions lie on the ground. They do not lie on ad hoc solutions for each and every boat. Unfortunately, that is the reality today. So how does the system work in the southern Mediterranean route? 3, 4, 5, 10 boats leave Libya's or Tunisia's shores. Once they leave, it is an issue. If they are outside our SAR, search and assistance region, it's the responsibility of somebody else. Once they enter into our SAR, then it is our responsibility. But for our patrol boats to reach out and assist, it takes hours. In the meantime, hundreds of lives, thousands of lives of innocent people have been lost. So the real solutions lie on the ground. Let me take Libya's example. Perhaps it's the best country that we know. The solutions lie in investing in Libya. We have been discussing this point at European Union level, but unfortunately that discussion has of yet fallen quite flat, in the sense that we have seen no real and tangible investment in Libya. Whereas foreign actors who have different interests rather than controlling migration have put their foot down on Libya's territory and have their controlling interests there. Another part is the role that seemingly genuine NGOs play in this whole game. So let us not make the mistake of saying that migrants cross by themselves. They do not. They are assisted by very well organized and very well lubricated criminal organizations that are the same organizations that deal in the narcotics business and the oil smuggling business, and in a plethora of other illegal activities that give them the real financial muscle. So of course we're combating against very organized structures who are involved in this trade of human smuggling. So it is definitely not an easy situation to solve, and these NGOs have the facade of saving migrants at sea, but at the very same time, on many occasions, they are financed by the criminal organizations themselves. Unfortunately, we have had even European governments who have financed NGOs for their own political reasons. I'm not saying that they were the facade for criminal organizations, but we have had governments, you all know who they are, who have financed these NGOs, and we have had to take a hard stance approach of sending the flagged vessel to its particular flag state. So we have had to take tough decisions. Obviously now the second point which I would like to discuss with you, which leads me to the letter which was sent by 9 EU member states, is whether there should be a discussion on amending the European Convention for Human Rights. I think we are at a very embryonic stage where we have not even engaged in discussion, let alone considering any amendment. Whereas that discussion at EU level has been started already. We have not had formal engagement with the Council of Europe. And I think the next step, following tomorrow's meeting, which we shall be holding at EU level, where I shall be forwarding the idea of the Council of Europe that we should start discussions, is to examine whether the ECHR, whether international conventions, whether EU legislation itself caters to today's realities, whether the convention of 75 years ago addresses today's realities. I do not think that amendments should be necessary to this debate. I think we should start with this debate by realizing each other's realities, what we face as political leaders, what the realities are on the ground, and on the other hand, the protection that has to be offered to migrants that deserve asylum, for example, the genuine migrants. We're not talking about economic migrants, we're talking about asylum seekers here. And then at the same time, the policy which has to be applied as a returns mechanism to countries which are considered as being of safe origin. And there, as Malta, we have a very strong policy of repatriating those migrants who are not worthy of asylum when the country of return is one of safe origin. So that's the holistic policy that we adopt. Obviously, this is a subject which the discussion about is increasing because the pressures are huge on each and every one of us. So I do appreciate that the different perspectives are taken into consideration, and after all, we have to treat this subject with the dignity that it deserves. At the end of the day, we are talking about humans in very sensitive and fragile positions, about lives that potentially risk being lost. So at the end of the day also, we have a human duty to make sure that all those migrants that are worthy of protection and that deserve protection receive their protection. However, at the same time, we must manage well also each and every country's perspective. Thank you.
On behalf of the European People's Party, Vladimir Vardanyan. Vladimir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Prime Minister, nearly 8 years ago have passed since the assassination of Daphne Caruana Galizia, and justice has yet to be fully achieved. As you have already mentioned in your speech, several individuals involved in the murder are now serving sentences, including the recent accomplices serving life imprisonment. Nevertheless, the alleged mastermind, Jorgen Fenech, remains awaiting trial, and no substantial developments are not visible for a while. Mr. Prime Minister, what concrete steps is your government taking to ensure that the masterminds are finally brought to the justice? Thank you.
Thank you. Prime Minister, would you like to respond?
Thank you for your question. First of all, I will kick off with the investigation itself. The investigation into this case was a very complex one. And it showed that our authorities rose up to the occasion. Our investigative authorities, also with the help of authorities from other countries, they managed to track down a very complex criminal case. And they brought several perpetrators before our courts. And the results, the tangible and concrete results to date, show that our investigative authorities have done their job to perfection, I would say. Our prosecutorial authorities have done their job to perfection as well. And our courts have also risen to the occasion. I will start with the first 5 judgments. So up till now, we have had 6 people arraigned in court, and we have had judgment which has been delivered against 5 of them. 2 people have been condemned to 40 years imprisonment. A third person was condemned to 15 years of imprisonment, but he contributed to the finding of guilt in another trial by jury. The last 2 people who were found guilty just a few days ago were also sentenced, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, to life imprisonment. Life imprisonment in Malta means just what it means, life. So they get out of prison dead. I will address now your question on the alleged perpetrator or mastermind of this crime. So Jürgen Fenech was kept in preventive custody for the maximum allowable period under our law, which is 60 months, 5 years. Following that, he was granted bail under the most stringent bail conditions I have ever witnessed in Malta. And I am a practicing litigation lawyer. I have practiced in the criminal area, civil as well. So they are the most stringent bail conditions ever, including multi-million euro of guarantees in favor of the state of Malta should he not abide by his bail conditions. Obviously, a legal process means that accused people exercise their rights. A number of them, which have been exercised in this case by Mr. Fenech himself, arise from the European Convention on Human Rights itself. And they are rights which are given to people accused of crimes, which people in Malta, as they do also in other countries which are signatories of the European Convention on Human Rights, which in Malta's case is also part of our national legislation and transposed into our national legislation. They are rights which they exercise. The process, the total process as of to date has taken from 2017 to date. We're in 2025, as you say, around 8 years, but we have had results as well. So 5 people convicted, the last one awaiting trial by jury, and I am very, very confident that the investigations have been very thorough ones, as results from the convictions which have been registered in the first 5 cases. We have had nobody who has been accused and acquitted. Nobody. So that is a very positive development. Obviously, this case does not represent what the Maltese people stand for and the real values of the Maltese people. And I think our actions after that case happened, the total reform which we have done in our institutional setup, the way Malta appoints its judiciary. So, following the implementation of the Venice Commission report, which is a body of the Council of Europe, we are one of the only countries, of the few countries, where the political arm, the executive arm, government, does not have any say whatsoever in the appointment of the judiciary, in the appointment of judges and magistrates. So that was a very solid power that I released way back in 2020. The only involvement of Parliament is where it concerns the appointment of the Chief Justice, but that carries a 2/3 majority, so the opposition and government have to agree. The Commissioner of Police, who heads our investigative authorities, is appointed after a public call. He is examined by the Public Service Commission. He is subjected to a scrutiny by the Parliament, including by the opposition members. So we have done an overhaul of our institutional setup following that case, and I think now we are, if one were to consider the institutional setup of Malta today, I think many other countries could look at us and consider us as an example of best practice when it comes to the implementation of the best rule of law practices. So I think we have learned from that case and implemented robust reforms in practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. On behalf of the European Conservatives, Patriots and Affiliates, Katalin Sobor. Katalin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et tout d'abord, j'aimerais bien remercier à tous on a eu l'occasion d'écouter le corps malte hier ici à Strasbourg dans la magnifique cathédrale. Merci à vous et merci à Malte. Monsieur le Premier ministre, rares sont les pays européens qui ne fournissent pas des armes à l'Ukraine. Mais votre pays en fait assurément partie. Ces derniers mois, plusieurs avancées positives ont été enregistrées en faveur de la paix en Ukraine. Mais que pensez-vous pouvoir faire pour accélérer ces processus? Merci.
Prime Minister, would you like to respond?
Can the question be repeated, please? Because I didn't have interpretation at first.
So, do you need to repeat the question?
Be repeated, yes, please.
Okay, Catalin, can you please repeat the question?
Ça marche? Alors, ces derniers mois, plusieurs avancées positives ont été enregistrées en faveur de la paix en Ukraine. Mais que pensez-vous pouvoir faire pour accélérer ces processus? Et on sait que vous ne fournissez pas d'armes à l'Ukraine pendant la guerre. Merci.
Thank you. We don't even provide arms to Malta. Why? Because we have very stringent constitutional obligations that make us abide, and rightly so, to the principle of neutrality and non-alignment. However, we pursue a policy of active neutrality in the sense that we do not stand silent in the face of injustice. That is why we have taken very clear positions when the war broke up in February of 2022. We have taken a very clear position that we could never accept Russia's aggression on Ukrainian territory, and that Ukraine has a right to its territorial sovereignty. However, I do not think the solution lies in supplying more and more armaments, arms, weapons, weapons of destruction, weapons of death. And I think what has happened in these last 3 years and 4 months has shown us that without the tool of diplomacy, without the will to sit around the table of peace discussions, I think this is a war that will keep on dragging. During our tenure on the United Nations Security Council, and also when chairing the OSCE, notwithstanding our small size, the smallest island member state in the European Union, I think we have managed to make very solid contributions when it comes to pushing forward the message of peace, both when it concerns Ukraine and both when it concerns the Middle East. We have a humanitarian catastrophe happening there before our eyes, and I think we have to be very careful not to speak on one issue, but keep silent or relatively silent on the other. Both need to be given equal importance. That's why also the EU initiative, REARM, we have taken a very clear position there, that we will not disrupt the Commission's plans there. But at the same time, we cannot participate in that part of the REARM initiative that speaks about investing around 800 billion euro in our defense. And I think that line of approach goes beyond the issue of respecting our constitutional neutrality. I think we need to acknowledge that what has happened in the last months has not given us solutions. Rather, it has made matters perhaps worse. There have been thousands of lives which have been lost, children which have been displaced, 20,000 children who do not know who their real family is anymore. And I think we have to speak on behalf of all those people. The solution, no, does not lie in giving more weapons to Ukraine. At the same time, if you were to ask me what the real solution is, I would be hard-pressed to find the right answer, but it definitely does not lie in giving more weapons. Ukraine, no, must not cede its territorial sovereignty. But at the same time, we have had voices over the last months that have fueled the intensity of the war by saying that absolutely Ukraine must win the war. I will not say that Ukraine will not win the war, but I think the reality is there for all to see. So I think that is where the Council of Europe also has a very important role in the setting up of the special tribunal. Obviously, the question will be now, when will the special tribunal start to function? But I think, whereas the setting up is still at embryonic stage, tonight's signing is a very important step. The funding of the tribunal, the jurisdiction, which concerns crimes of aggression, when will the tribunal start to function, in which building, the yearly budget, which it will need to operate, but the register of damages as well, how it will intertwine with the Claims Commission as well. I think those are all points that we need, the reconstruction of Ukraine as well. Those are points that we need to discuss, but also always in the context of pushing forward peace and not investment in armaments and weapons of destruction. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the ALDE Group, Liliana Tanguy. Liliana.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Au nom du groupe ALDE, je salue l'engagement de Malte pour la protection des océans, concrétisé par la ratification récente du traité de la haute mer lors de la conférence des Nations Unies pour les océans qui s'est tenue en France à Nice il y a 2 semaines. Ce geste politique fort arrive à un moment crucial pour notre planète et revêt une grande importance pour la députée de Bretagne que je suis d'une circonscription maritime du Finistère. Monsieur le Premier ministre, quel rôle le Conseil de l'Europe peut-il jouer pour faire avancer le droit à un environnement sain que nous défendons à la PCE et encourager les États membres à agir de manière plus ambitieuse pour la protection de notre planète? Je vous remercie.
Prime Minister, would you like to respond?
Thank you. We come from an island which, of course, has the issue of insularity. In the case of our sister island, Gozo, the issue of double insularity. And of course, the oceans for us are of primary importance. The blue economy for us is pivotal. In fact, in the coming months, we're issuing for the first time blue bonds in Malta to push forward the message where it comes to climate awareness. I will share some of our experiences when it comes to the preservation of the oceans, and obviously those could be shared with PACE. It kicked off with some thinking from our end about the incompatibilities that we were witnessing. Imagine having vessels carrying cargo across our oceans, obviously needed for the supply for logistics, being powered by heavy fuel oil, the most intoxicating and damaging fuel to our environment. But at the same time, ashore, we were launching initiatives to electrify the car fleet, the transport fleet. This is what we were seeing. We were not even, as a maritime fleet, using lesser polluting fuels. Why? Because of cost. Now we have seen the major cruise liners, even those that visit Malta, switch to LNG, which I believe is an intermediate fuel, not the end target fuel, which will probably be hydrogen at the end of the day. But a step in the positive direction there has been registered. We have done some initiatives to protect our seas in Malta, which obviously remain a vital part of our economy. Tourism makes up around approximately 1/3 of our economy when it concerns the main tourism itself, hospitality, and the ancillary services. So for us, preserving our seas and the integrity of our seas is of paramount importance. At the same time, we're launching interesting renewable energy projects and utilizing the sea as a resource. We're in the procurement process of offshore renewable projects, which will see us installing floating solar panels within our territorial waters and wind turbines beyond our territorial waters, but within our exclusive economic zone, which will supply us with a great percentage of our energy needs. And that is why preserving the quality of our seas is also very important for us. When it comes to the maritime industry, which, of course, is a heavy pollutant of the maritime sector and our seas. An initiative which we had launched a number of years back saw us introducing a shore-to-ship project, whereas ships which come into our harbor, for now limited to the cruise liner industry, which we have fortunately good numbers of, when they enter our harbor, they switch off their engines and their generators, and they take electricity from ashore. It's an EU-funded project, mostly from EU, and with a small percentage of national funds. Right as we speak, we're extending this project also to our commercial port, where it will be extended to commercial vessels. So what we're doing within the context of the smallest EU member state, I think we're introducing a number of measures which obviously cumulatively contribute to a larger extent. When it comes to the transport system of Malta, what we've seen is that we have immense potential to utilize the seas for transportation within the island. And that would lead us to a modal shift in how we utilize transport. So what we have done and what we're inaugurating also in the coming days is separate ferry landings, which will see us cross the island with a number of ferry stops and encouraging people also by giving certain subsidies to use maritime transport as their daily means of commuting. So I've mentioned a number of initiatives. When it comes to onshore initiatives, what we're trying to do is maximizing the use of renewable energy. However, within the context of the challenges that a small island faces. What we lack, for sure we don't lack wind and we don't lack the sun, but we lack land space. So we have this ongoing challenge of utilizing agricultural space to create more renewable energy installations. And that is something, and that is a direction which we do not want to pursue. So what we're doing right now is utilizing the maximum roof spaces over our buildings, utilizing public spaces like car parks to install solar panels. So within the challenges that we face, few challenges that we face as a small island member state of the EU, we're doing our best to really concentrate on the subject of environmental sustainability, and I believe that, yes, it should be a top priority for each and everybody of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. On behalf of the United European Left, George Lukaidis. George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Prime Minister, how do you intend to help safeguard the credibility of Member States and the Council of Europe itself when geopolitical self-interest leads to double standards and selective sensitivity to violations of international law, even in the face of genocide as in Gaza? Second question in relation to Malta. As you already responded in relation to the matter of Daphne Caruana Galizia, how do you respond in criticism as well about the reforms? And as you said that these reforms should be an example to follow, how do you respond to the question if you are willing to send these reforms to the Venice Commission for opinion as you consider them example?
Thank you, George. Prime Minister, would you like to respond?
I am very proud to say that we implemented the Venice Commission report in full, apart from some very minor aspects where unfortunately our opposition opposed. And right as we speak, last week, one of the suggestions of Greco, if I'm not mistaken, was that we should give the Chief Justice a role in the appointment of his successor when he comes to retirement age. And that is what we precisely did. We wanted to introduce a new role for the Chief Justice, a consultative role as suggested by Greco, if I'm not mistaken, and the opposition opposed to that. But when it comes to the absolute majority of the reforms of the Venice Commission, we took the report and we implemented it, lock, stock, and barrel. And that is something which has found acceptance since these last 4 years. So we had, following the reforms of 2020, which dragged until 2021, but by 2021 we had finished the whole raft of reforms which had been suggested to us. We have had absolutely no issue with the Venice Commission. I think also the Venice Commission cites us as an example of best practice when it comes to reforms. But at the same time, I do have to state that not each and every member of the Council of Europe or of the European Union has implemented these reforms. So, citing Malta's example, I think they could follow suit as well. I think they have served us well. The reforms that we did, particularly when it concerns the independence of the judiciary, have served us very, very well. And during these last years, we have had absolutely no controversies on the appointment of the judiciary. The fact also that we have managed to increase court efficiency, both when it comes to the civil caseload, the administrative caseload, and also the criminal backlog of cases. So one of the results of those reforms was that we increased the number of members of our judiciary to a record high, and the efficiency within our law courts has really increased. So that is something which we are very happy of. As regards the first part of your question, I mean, I was the first to raise the point that we should not get caught in double standards. And I will go back a bit to 2022, February and October. Whereas the approach following February 22, I think, was quite unanimous. And that's good, that we need to support fully Ukraine. as we do within our constitutional limitations with humanitarian assistance, with non-lethal equipment, with life-saving equipment, with getting people from Ukraine for medical treatment. That is something which we do constantly because that is in line with our constitution and that allows us. So we support constantly. Up until a few days ago, we allotted another pocket of financial aid to Ukraine. That is what we do constantly. But after October the 22nd of 2022, after the 7th of October, I think what was characteristic was our fragmentation, in the sense that we had sides. We had some of us who supported one side, we had some who supported the other side, instead of taking a clear line of condemning the 7 October attacks by Hamas, of not accepting retaliation which exceeded the limits of proportionality. And I'll tell you what Malta has done. I have asked the family members of the hostages which were captured by Hamas to visit me, and I hosted them in my office, 2 hours meeting them, and you could see the pain in their eyes. The families of the hostages, some of which have been released, some of which have died, some of which remain in captivity, and I once again appeal for their immediate release, but you could see the pain. They are not against the Ukrainians. They are victims themselves. They are Israeli people who are victims themselves of these atrocities. But at the same time, I cannot close my eyes on the 55,000 people who have lost their lives, on the Palestinians who we have brought to Malta, children. They weren't even aware that their limbs, their arms, were bombed, that they lost their legs, their feet, their arms. These are the children that I have met 4 weeks ago in Malta. We brought them over to give them whatever medical care we can give them, but we can only provide them with a prosthesis because they have no arms, they have no legs. They have their faces all marked in black with the explosives. So those are the realities. They are permanently scarred for life, psychologically. They have lost their mothers, their fathers, their grandparents, their brothers and sisters. So those are the realities. Humanitarian aid is not reaching Gaza. And people are dying of hunger, of thirst, from lack of medicines, from infections, from the lack of basic sanitary facilities. And I think we have to be equally strong that the only solution to these atrocities is peace building. We have to sit around the table of negotiations, of peace building, and ensure that we reach a permanent ceasefire, both where it concerns the war between Ukraine and Russia, and also Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Dear colleagues, actually we have to conclude the questions, but we have heard earlier Prime Minister talking about the Youth Council. So we have among us a representative of the Maltese Youth Council, Mr. Francesco Gelel, whom I give the opportunity to ask a question to the Prime Minister. I would very much like to welcome this initiative of our Maltese delegation and the Maltese authorities, which I hope will be followed by the forthcoming presidencies of the Committee of Ministers. Mr. Gelel, you have the floor for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honourable Prime Minister, across Europe, many young people are hesitant to engage in the democratic process, often due to a feeling of being uninformed or excluded. In 2018, Malta lowered the voting age to 16, marking a pivotal step towards ensuring that young people have a say in the choices that affect their future. How would you assess the development of youth empowerment in Malta over the past 7 years? What additional initiatives should be taken in Malta and across Europe, particularly in the realm of civil education, to strengthen young people's democratic participation? Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. Prime Minister.
I think lowering the voting age to 16 was one of the better decisions that we took as government. And it wasn't just a symbolic decision. It wasn't done for the aesthetics of it. It was done because we truly believe that our younger generation are not tomorrow's leaders, but rather they are today's leaders. That is why only a few months ago, we came up also with the idea of the introduction, as I mentioned earlier, of the Youth Advisory Forum, a consultative forum, made up of our younger generation, which meets every month or every 3 weeks, and which advises us as Cabinet of Ministers on the most sensitive of topics. Right, just a few weeks ago, we launched a public consultation process on voluntary euthanasia in Malta. And it was the Youth Advisory Forum which we consulted first with the first draft of legislation that we proposed, but rather than going through the formal route and through the usual route of the Cabinet of Ministers, I had decided to first consult the Youth Advisory Forum. And it was very worthwhile that I did, because they suggested a number of changes there, which I then proposed to the formal Cabinet of Ministers before launching the formal public consultation process. And that particular example showcased the importance of involving our youth's perspective in decision-making. So the lowering of the voting age, the right to have people of 16 years becoming vice mayors and mayors of our localities. That was a subject which in 2019, in our regional elections of 2019, we had an issue where a 16-year-old got the second largest amount of votes in the locality, meaning that he had to be appointed as vice mayor. But he couldn't because of the prohibition of our legislation, which we then amended to address that situation. Ian, our Deputy Prime Minister, was appointed as mayor of his locality when he was still 18 years old. The results were there for all to see. So I thoroughly believe in the capabilities of our younger generation. Of course, the major challenge lies in attracting our younger generation to participate more. And that is why I think we shouldn't do politics necessarily only in the traditional way. But we have to appeal to what our younger generation is looking for. That is why I commend the initiative of the Secretary General to launch the Framework AI Convention. I think that is a major milestone that our youth can really contribute to. In the digital sector, our youths are the best, and that is why we have to bring them forward to engage them more in the importance of public life. At the end of the day, politics shapes today's decisions and shapes tomorrow's landscape. And the younger generation have a choice to make. They can remain as spectators and let others dictate their decisions and impose them on them, or they can be themselves the protagonists and the future shapers of the future that they want to. I do understand. I mean, sometimes we get disenchanted ourselves with politics done in the traditional way, the personal attacks, which I personally don't like at all. But at the end of the day, politics can bring about huge positive changes in people's lives. Looking to Malta's example, the way we have managed to strengthen our pension system, the way we have managed to totally better the lives of our older generation, the way we have managed to strengthen our stipend system given to our students, the way we introduced childcare system, a free childcare system for all, a free public transport system both by land and by sea to all people residing in Malta, the way we have managed to keep down our energy costs and fuel costs. Those are all major strategic decisions which we have managed to shape through political decisions. That is where our younger generation has to contribute. I invite you to participate in public life. I am sure that you have a very important role to give and an excellent contribution to give. That is why I have a very young Cabinet of Ministers with the average age around 43. That is why a good number of youths form part of our parliamentary group as well as government. So that is something which I really believe in the abilities and capabilities of our younger generation to shape not only today's, but also tomorrow's future. Thank you.
Dear Prime Minister, on behalf of the Assembly, most warmly for this address and answering the questions. Dear colleagues, I just want to inform you that the Maltese presidency is organizing an event immediately after this meeting outside of this hemicycle. You are all welcome to participate. And I want to tell you that this Assembly will hold its next public sitting this afternoon at 4 p.m. with the agenda approved on Monday. I hope you will all be here. I just want to remind you that this evening we are receiving at the organization and the Assembly later the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. The sitting is adjourned.